Can you hear me, Will?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Mhm. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Will Johnson.
Good morning.
Hi, Lauren. Hi, Tommy.
Good morning.
Excuse me.
Hi.
Good morning, Councilwoman Ryder, Councilman Smith.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. I'm doing a quick message with Diana Ray because she's going to get her 1-year scan today.
Man, prayers for Diana.
Tell Diana we said hi and hope it goes well.
Here, I'll let you tell her really quickly because I'm recording a message to her. She can see you if you say something.
Hi, Diana. Hope everything goes well today. We miss you.
All right, I'll mute myself and finish my message.
Good morning, Councilman Roberto.
Good morning, David. I changed up my positioning a little bit today, so I'll be lots of natural light from this direction.
Is that your good
Hopefully that's
side?
my good side.
Yeah.
I had to
Tommy-
close my blinds. I had too much light, so there is no good side.
Tommy looks to be joining us from his office.
I am ventured in, yeah, hunkered down.
Tommy, I so enjoy seeing your youngsters run into the middle of meetings. It's so disappointing.
Yeah, we spent, last night, one of them with Jamie spent the night at Children's with 3 stitches, and a brother knocked a food can down onto sister's finger and broke it and cut it, stitches. So
Oh, how late were you up?
I was only up to midnight. Jamie was up till 4. So.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Wait, what happened? I wasn't listening. You had one of your kids.
Yeah, one of my sons knocked a food can down and onto my daughter's finger and broke it, and it was massive.
That sounds. So the injured one was the 7-year-old or 4-year-old? One of the 4-year-old.
4-year-old, yeah, 4-year-old. We started making deposits to Children's Hospital a year or 2 ago, just knowing it's coming. So we got a credit there. We're good.
Tommy,
morning,
we
boys.
had to do the same thing. There was like a 6-month period where we got in stitches at the hospital enough times that the doctors kind of knew that, who we were and that we were coming. It's like, can we stop like roughhousing a little bit, And the last one was actually when my mother was watching the girls and I was in Chattanooga for hearings. So I got a call about how this had happened. I had to, get back just as quick as I could. So I understand how that goes.
I asked him how much it would cost, like, per room, if we could just have a room ready. We're not there yet.
My kids haven't hurt themselves playing video games yet. That's what Finley tells me. It's safer.
Well, that's good. That's a good thing.
What do you think? And then I'll plug it into this just in case I use my phone.
Boys, we can hear you moving. You might mute.
I'll try not to move, sir.
All right. Mute is a good thing.
Mhm.
Morning, Charlie.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, Mr. Bryce?
would you try sending Miss Welch her login link again? She's having a difficult time signing in.
Yes.
Thank you.
By the way, I've now burned out 2 cameras and microphones. So now I have, or they're not work. They don't work after they get heated up for a while. I get, as someone called it, Darth Vader voice. So as not to alarm anybody with my weird video or garbled audio, I now have one of these laptops that hopefully this one will, do the trick. But if I do, if any of us get garbled or are not being seen, like, don't let us ramble on without being understood. So let's just help each other if that's happening with Wi-Fi connectivity issues or microphones that start to fade or whatever, because we want to make sure everybody has a good connection. Or if we don't have a good connection, we pause until it's fixed. Or find some alternate means. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Vice Mayor Gwen McKenzie. I'd like to ask Mr. Johnson if he could confirm that we have all council members dialed in.
I believe we are missing Councilwoman Singh.
Okay.
But that's the only one.
Okay. Okay, well, hopefully she'll be able to join us in just a few minutes before we get too far into the agenda. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join the call this morning. I also want to thank the City Council staff members, Mr. Johnson, who facilitates and keeps everything moving smoothly during our meetings with the Zoom and audio and presentations. I also want to thank Angela, who is his support system for everything that we do in the office, and then also to Savannah, for putting together her auditor notes, which I hope that we all have had an opportunity to review and will use as references as we go through this process, which will make it easier for us to keep up with the departments that will be presenting to us. Also want to thank the mayor and staff members that are here today that will be presenting to us. As we move through this process, council members, if you have questions after the presentation, if you will, please, if Mr. Johnson does not see your hand raised, if you would please speak up so that we know that you have a question before we move on to the next item on the agenda, the next department. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mayor Kincannon for remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor McKenzie. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you. I do wish we could meet in person. Good morning, Councilwoman Singh. I'm sure, I know many of you have been to these budget hearings in the past as council members or as members of the audience, and I've been as a member of Mayor O'Hara's staff, and they're really good discussions, but it's also in the past been an opportunity to have a cup of coffee together and sort of break bread, and I lament that we are not able to do that this year, but it is nice to see everybody, and I appreciate your time and energy on all of our issues, including the budget, which is such an important part of what we do. This is my first budget I'm presenting as mayor, so that's exciting. The city is on firm financial footing despite the impacts of COVID-19, and I credit that to years of responsible stewardship of taxpayer dollars, and that is helping us weather the initial economic implications of the pandemic. And at this juncture, we are not furloughing staff, we are not cutting services, and we are not deferring any maintenance of critical infrastructure. Also, this proposed budget does not include a tax increase. Thanks to a healthy fund balance, we are able to continue operating without asking our residents to shoulder a tax increase in the midst of a pandemic. However, it's not the budget I'd hoped to bring to you. Because of the pandemic, it's a year of fiscal austerity. It is a year of making sure we have the basics covered, even if it means we cannot do all the things we hope to do. The proposed capital budget is smaller, $12 million lower than in recent years, and focuses on core infrastructure needs. The operating budget maintains the staffing and resource levels necessary to continue as we've done in the past year. As I said, no furloughs are anticipated. And in fact, I'm proposing that employees receive their annual 2.5% raise, and also that this budget covers the increase in healthcare costs. So that the healthcare cost to employees is the same. Staffing levels are my proposal is that they would remain flat with one notable exception, a new deputy director for KEMA. And you're going to hear from Colin Ickes on Friday. And just while I have a minute on Colin Ickes and KEMA have done a great job. Can everybody hear me okay? I've had some technical difficulties in the past. Okay. Good, thank you. I've always said and continue to say and believe firmly that our employees are our biggest investment, our most important asset, and it's through them that we effectively advance our priorities as a community. And back in February, before the pandemic hit, at our budget retreat, I introduced 4 core values of my administration, which reflect the values that I hear are important to the residents of Knoxville. And those are public safety, healthy and connected neighborhoods, a clean and resilient future, thriving businesses and jobs. Because of the pandemic, these values and areas we see them in a slightly different light, but my team and I are going to continue working toward each of them, and you're going to see these themes reflected in the budget and the work of our departments over the next 2 days. As in the past, the largest portion of the budget is devoted to the operations of police and fire departments in order to advance public safety as a primary and core function of city government. In order to support continuing investments in transparency and accountability within the police department, the budget includes funding of $746,400 for body-worn cameras, along with the software and staffing to make that, to implement that. In addition, we've maintained funding for the BHUC, the Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center, and continue to support the Metro Drug Coalition, who are critical, both are critical elements to providing a continuum of care for those in our community dealing with mental health and substance abuse issues. You will also see a continued commitment to funding for affordable housing. 7.5 million allocated to support affordable housing in the city, and that includes the city's investment, 2.5 million in the Affordable Rental Development Fund, and supporting the creation of new affordable and workforce housing. We also continue local funding support for emergency solution grants to serve those currently experiencing homelessness. This is a core and fundamental value of my administration. Affordable housing was the #1 concern across the city during the campaign, and continues to be an even more acute need during the pandemic. So this budget attempts to strengthen neighborhoods and address the very real housing challenges so many local families face. We'll also continue to invest in neighborhoods throughout the city through neighborhood scale amenity improvements to parks and rec, continued maintenance of sidewalks and greenways, and planning and infrastructure to support continued revitalization. We also remain committed to a clean and resilient future, and this budget continues our investment in stormwater infrastructure, in transit, and in curbside recycling. I'm pleased this year to be able to make an initial investment in a sustainability innovation fund to support training and equipment to help our city facilities be even more energy efficient. I don't know if any of you had a chance to participate in the first Climate Council meeting we had earlier this week. Facilities are a big source of energy use. So to the extent that we can make our facilities as efficient as possible, not just the city facilities, but facilities across our community can be a big difference maker. We must also focus on supporting businesses and good jobs. This is an area where we all are acutely aware of the challenges, short and long term, that face our economy. And I want to underscore the city's commitment to working both on our own staff and with local partners to ensure a healthy economy with strong career pathways. The budget continues to support job growth and development for businesses of all sizes, including support for the Chamber, the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center, as well as the Maker City Initiative. Workforce development is going to be a critical challenge as we look ahead to our economic recovery from this pandemic, and coordination both internally and with partners will be critical. We've maintained our funding to support community schools. I'm a big fan of the community schools program, and I think it's a really effective strategy to help invest in our youngest members of our community. We've also maintained over $1.7 million of funding for community agency grants, and this helps social service and cultural organizations who support our Knoxville community. Department leaders are here over the next 2 days to answer specific questions, and my deputies will be online and available throughout the budget hearings as well. Boyce Evans and his team have done incredible work preparing this budget and preparing to answer your questions. I will be participating in listening in on the legislative hearings continuously. I might at times have to mute and take my video off to take some other calls and meetings, but I am here and listening and looking forward to the discussion. And also, if anybody has, David and Boyce Evans are going to be speaking next, but if anyone has any questions for me before we get into the meat of this, I'm here to hear them. Any questions or comments right now? Okay, well, I'll hand it over to Boyce Evans and David Brace to give an overview of the budget. Thank you, David and Boyce.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, good morning, members of City Council and Vice Mayor McKenzie, Mayor Concannon. Good to be here on Zoom, and we look forward to 2 days of informative dialogue. And as Mayor Concannon referenced, the deputies will be on, and Boyce will be on the Zoom all day today and tomorrow. We should be able to answer any of your questions, but if we can't, we will get back to you with answers as quickly as possible. So the proposed budget, fiscal year 2021, really serves two functions. It's our legal authority to spend money, and it reflects our values and how we deliver on priorities. It's an important document, and the budget process is really a year-round process. It's cyclical. And so this year has been incredibly unique and challenging. As you all know, Boyce Evans is our acting CFO. So he rolled into a position not anticipating a pandemic. But his team, in the middle of the budget process, had to pivot very quickly and adjust. And they did that in a way that was professional. And it was difficult, but I would also say that it did help solidify the team in finance after a transition from a long-serving finance director. And it also helped solidify the mayor's team and the deputies as we work through that pivot. I am proud of what finance has done, and it's not been a singular person, one person, it's been a team. And specifically, I do want to thank Boyce Evans, Bo Cole, Robin Shelton, Miranda Brock, Cheryl Davis, Penny Owens, and the entire finance department team. They were behind the scenes, and the work that they do is incredibly important for everything that allows the city to meet the needs of our residents and visitors, and to, again, execute on the priorities that we have in place. So despite these challenges, as Mayor Concanon stated in her opening comments, this is a responsible budget, and it's focused on core services and infrastructure. This budget also validates the work of previous elected bodies and administrations. The fact that we are able to continue providing core services and meeting the infrastructure needs, the core infrastructure needs of our city, says a lot about our policies and the reserves that we had in place to do that. And so this is a responsible budget, and it highlights the need for reserves and good fiscal management in the long term. And so, looking back on my time at the city, decisions made literally a decade, 15 years ago are allowing us to continue to function now and meet those needs. These are unprecedented times, but I am proud of the work that we've been able to do over the last few months. And I'm going to turn it over to Boyce for more details on the budget. Thank you.
Good morning, and good to be with you this morning to talk through our proposed budget. Before I get into that, though, I would like to let you know, they're not here with me right now, but some of the key people that we have in our finance department, our division chiefs, Mr. Bo Cole, he's the comptroller, and he's in charge of the accounting and budget division. We've got Donna Dyer, who is the division chief for the revenue division. We've got Kitron, who is serving as our treasurer with her team there. And we've got Miss Penny Owens, who is our purchasing agent and in charge of the purchasing division. And I do have one person in here in the office with me. I'll just call her the queen of the budget, Robin Shelton, because she knows pretty much everything about it. So if you ask me anything really hard, that's who I'm going to be looking to. But no, she's probably the most senior of the accountants that we have, are right in there at the top, and she's instrumental to the budget process. Also, before I get into the budget itself, I want to explain that there's, and you've probably noticed this, if you're looking at it for this time, first time, we need to remember that there's a good bit of difference between a governmental budget and that which you might see in private industry, because the accounting is different. We as local governments are not only required to comply with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, but also with what's called GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board, their pronouncements and so forth. So what does that mean? Well, that means as you're looking at the budget, we show interfund transfers and interfund charges in the total budget, but we back them out for the net budget. And let's talk about what those are. Interfund charges, an example is if you've got a using department, let's say it was the public service department, that's having their vehicles worked on. Well, each time a vehicle gets worked on, the money for that job order, if you will, is provided to fleet as fleet works on their vehicles. The money does not actually leave the city, but we do this for accounting purposes so that we know how much in this example that the departments are spending for fleet services and how much fleet receives for their services. And we do this for a lot of funds with these interfund charges: healthcare, risk management, equipment replacement. Those are just a few of the ones that we do that with. And then we have, and I think that comes up to like 30 million in total. I'll get to that here in a second. And then interfund charges, we also back those out of the total budget. What are those? It's about 55 million, and it's transfers from the general fund to other funds to balance them out because they simply don't earn enough revenue to pay for themselves. Examples are we have to transfer money from the general fund to our solid waste fund, our stormwater fund, our public assembly facilities. And again, the money is not actually leaving the city. It's analogous to one company writing a check to another company, but it's internal. So you have our total budget, and we back out that interfund charges of right at 30 million, interfund transfers of about 55 million to get to our net budget. The fund balance is another area. You might see that, you know, if you're looking at private industry as equity and that type thing. Well, it's the same thing in a way, but we're required to categorize it, our savings account, if you will, into things like non-spendable, assigned, committed, restricted. And then we, of course, we have the unassigned fund balance, which is that which is fungible, available for use. So bottom line is there are differences between a local government's budget like ours and you know, the balance sheet or the budget of a private industry. Now, I want to take a few minutes to talk about probably what's on the uppermost of my mind, but probably yours as well, is what are the effects of the pandemic on the city from a financial perspective? And in short, we've got some revenue shortfalls. And I would say 6 million, maybe a little bit over, are directly in FY21 attributed to the pandemic. We're looking at coming up $982,000 short of what our initial estimates were for state shared sales tax, $1 million short for our local option sales tax. The gas tax is down by about $550K. Mixed drink taxes down by roughly $300K. And the hall tax, the hall income tax, is down by about 3 million. And that's kind of a large number. Why is that? Well, if you've got investments, the market's so volatile right now, and frankly, earnings are relatively low, you're likely not to cash out right now. Plus, if you know the hall income tax is getting ready to end in in FY22, next FY, then you're going to hold your cards. So we've budgeted that at only 1.6 million in revenue, and that's about $3 million less than what we had it budgeted for this year. So again, got about 6 million short in revenues due to the pandemic, and as a result, the budget is relatively austere compared to past budgets. The mayor pointed that out. You know, there was other things she'd like to have in here. There's other things I'd love to have in here myself, but we had to make some hard choices there. But the good news is we do have enough to weather the storm with our reserves and our unassigned fund balance without cuts to basic services. Now, some of the budget highlights are, I mentioned total budget a minute ago. That is right at 35 million if you round up. Now that's roughly $9 million short of what it was last year, about 2% down what it is in FY20. And the decrease is largely attributed to capital spending. We cut just over 12 million in that compared to last year. Our net budget, after we exclude those interfund transfers of 55.7 million and our interfund charges of roughly 30 million, which are, as I said, effectively double counted, then we end up with a net budget of $334.4 million. And again, this is down from last year by roughly 1.8 million and some change. Our general fund, which is the chief operating fund of the city, is 234.6 million. Now that is up by 3.5 million or 1.5%. And that's due primarily to, higher salaries, that 2.5% increase that occurs every year per ordinance. Benefits and operating expenses just go up all the time. Our the capital budget is 24 million this year and some change. And as I said, that's a reduction of just over 12 million from last year. Our most stable source of revenue is property taxes. It remains at $2.46 per $100 of assessed value. But a thing to note there, and I mentioned this at the budget retreat, seems like an eternity ago, but it wasn't. Our effective rate is only $2.08. We're actually, in terms of real dollars, when you account for inflation, 32 cents below what we were 10 years ago. So that's an important thing to remember. Want to switch gear. And by the way, I'm talking about things that the departments that you're going to be hearing from for the next 2 days are, they're not going to talk about these things. These are general areas that apply to the whole city. And that's what I'm focused on. They'll talk to you about their individual budgets. But talk about debt and the city's debt. Our total debt at the end of next month, June 30th, will be 140.4 million. Now, 88.8 million of that is from convention center debt, and 51.6 million of that comes from general obligation bonds and notes for various projects over the years. We're scheduled to pay down 11.4 million of that in the upcoming in FY21, which would leave us with 128.9 million in debt. But we also need to be mindful of the fact that we're going out for somewhere between 62.25 and 65 million. We won't know for sure till we get there in new debt. We'll go to market for that probably sometime in the fall. Once we do that, that means we would end the year of FY21 with about 193.9 million, just say 194 million. Now, one thing, you'll see that referenced going out for new debt in the executive summary, but we don't put an exact amount that we'll have to increase it by our debt service payments because we won't know till we go to market. We've got the money in our debt service fund to do that. A rule of thumb is you pay about $80,000 per $1 million of debt you borrow. So based on that calculation, we're looking at it costing, well, if we go out in the fall, that'd be about a half year that we have to pay on, about $2.5 million. So we're good to go on that. But that will come to you as a budget amendment later on in the fiscal year to make that happen. And speaking of amendments, some guidance that the comptroller's office is very important for us to remember is that this is probably going to be a year of more than we've had in the past budget amendments because, myself and my counterpart down the hall from the county, we got together and we figured out, where we think we would take our hits in these areas from the revenue from the pandemic. And we did the best that we could on that in the absence of any guidance from anybody. There was no federal guidance at the time. There was no state guidance at the time, nor is there still. And, because this has been heretofore unheard of. You don't have empirical data that you can go back on. So we've done the best that we can. Is it right? I don't know. I think we're pretty close to right. It's appearing that way right now from stuff we're seeing come in from the state. But I suspect there'll be some changes. If we were too liberal, maybe we'll have to cut back some. If we were too conservative, maybe that'll free up some dollars in some other areas. But I just wanted to, just be advised that we'll probably be coming to you with more budget amendments than normal in this upcoming FY. The pension fund for FY21 is fully funded. You know, our normal contribution, which is what you would pay if there was no unfunded liability, is 9.2 million in the FY21 budget. And the payments for the unfunded liability, which we do have, are 19.6 million. So if you add those two together, that means we're paying about 28.8 million into the pension fund for this upcoming fiscal year. So again, pension fund, we've got that covered. No issues there. Switch gears here and talk personnel for just a second. We have 1,566 authorized full-time positions in the FY21 proposed budget that you have. That is an increase of only one position from what it was last year. And as the mayor mentioned, that's the deputy director for EMA. And note though that the county funds half of that, and they have agreed to do so. So we only pay 50% of that. Our total part-time positions, 33, those remain unchanged from last year. No change there. There's no increase to healthcare costs. The proposed budget for healthcare is 21.87 million from the city. That's 1.2% higher than the current FY, but the city is going to pay that difference. We're not going to pass that difference on to our employees. Now let's talk about fund balance for a second. Right now, our estimated, as of this coming June 30th, next month, we estimate the total fund balance ending the year with 71.3 million. 17.9 million of that would be unassigned fund balance, what you can get your hands on, if you will. But recall that we plan to spend, and this is in your budget, 11.47 million of that unassigned fund balance to balance the budget for FY21, which you have in front of you. And the reason that you take that 11.47 million down, and you can break it down as follows. We're spending 2.93 million of that on capital. We put 2.315 into a reserve that is required by charter, that 1% of the general fund. And then the rest is for, frankly, revenue shortfalls. The shortfall from essentially from the pandemic, areas that we were growing in before, we're now not only not growing, we're taking hits in them. So by the time you account for that 11.47 million in unassigned fund balance, it would bring at the end, about this time next year, at the end of not this coming June, but the next June, June 30th, 2021, our total fund balance, if nothing else changed, would be 59.8 million, and our unsigned fund balance would be 6.4 million. I say we're still in decent shape because, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't want to dig into that unassigned fund balance anymore. But we're still in decent shape because our financial advisor, PFM, states that we need to have, any local governments ought to have roughly 25% of their general fund, which is in our case 58.6 million, set aside, if you will, so it's liquid and you can use it if you get in a bind. We're just about there. We're a little bit lower than that. We've got 46.9 million of our total fund balance that is reserved. That's that 20% of the general fund that by council's policy from years ago gets set aside into an assigned portion of our fund balance. Then as I said, we've got 2.35 million or 1% of the general fund set aside in our, per the charter that is committed to that. And then we have that 6.4 million in unassigned fund balance. So In some, PFM says we should be at 58.6 million. We'll be at about 55.7 million. We're only 2.9 million below where we would, where I'd like to be for that. But again, I've talked with our financial advisors. Everybody pretty much everywhere is in similar shape, and most are in much worse shape. So again, austere budget, if you will, compared to previous years, but it does fund our basic core services, and it takes care of our employees, which really are the most important part of our organization, since we're a surface organization. And then just switching gears for a second here, talk about the schedule, and then I'll entertain any questions you've got. Today and tomorrow, obviously, are the legislative budget hearings. We have the second reading of the budget slated for this coming Tuesday evening, May 19th. June 15th, by the charter, is the last possible day for council to approve the budget ordinance and the tax levy ordinance. And then July 1st begins the new fiscal year. So that is all I have. And if I got my time right, that would have taken me about 20 minutes. So I'll just open it up to any questions that you might have right now. Okay.
Boys, can you hear me? This is Tommy.
Yes.
Hello? Oh, hi. If I followed the math right, you said that we had 11.4 million in unassigned total fund balance. 2.9 of that went to capital. 2.3 went to reserves. I may have got a decimal wrong, but that leaves, I think you mentioned 6.4. And earlier you said that third bucket was generally to pay for things related to COVID that we weren't having to pay before. So would I connect the dots right there? The 6.4 is a number to consider as the city's financial response to the pandemic?
No, sir. I hope I didn't misspeak there. No, that is to make up for our revenue shortfalls.
Right.
The shortfalls due to the pandemic, not necessarily what we're paying out as a result of the pandemic. But
Okay.
in other words, we rely every year on that state shared sales tax, that local option sales tax, that gas
Sure.
tax, and so forth.
Sure. There's no doubt we've paid millions, over $1 million in some way, shape, or form to fund services for people in the city that are suffering, but this is just a shortfall.
Yeah,
amount.
these are shortfalls. And that one, I think it's 1.17 million that you're talking about, that would have come out of, that did come out of this FY, the FY
Right.
that we're currently in, not the budget for FY 21.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a
Councilman
question
Roberto,
on
sir.
that one. I'm sorry.
I'll entertain questions from anybody that's got them. Go ahead, man.
So 2.3 million going to reserves, and then we have the unassigned balance. I was thinking of our unassigned balance as our reserve, but we have a separate reserve fund.
It's kind of weird. You got two, ma'am. One of them is that I think it's 2.35 thereabouts. And that's 1% of our general fund. And that is designated by charter to be set aside as a reserve for really emergencies, if you had them. That was the spirit of that as I read that in the charter. And then there was also a policy developed about the time I came to the city around 14 years ago. I didn't know anything about it at that time because I wasn't in this position, but that said, and council approved it, that we set aside another 20% of our general fund as a type of reserve. But frankly, that one is a bit more, we can get our hands on it. We can use it. And for what we do with that, I'm glad you asked this, because what we do with that is we cash flow a lot of the year with that money. For instance, we make our money in October, March, and to a lesser extent, December. That's when all the property tax revenue comes in. And then we're kind of in the red on just sitting around on cash after that in terms of cash in, cash out. So we end up cash flowing a lot of things with that 20%, ma'am.
And Boyce, let me jump in. I think you explained that really well. So we have reserves. One is via charter, the 1%, and then we have a policy. Miss Savannah actually sent that out, I believe, the members of council, the fund balance policy that we utilize for, again, a savings, emergency savings account, and it cash flows our operation. There are municipalities or counties that have to run a line of credit and pay interest on payroll, which is not a good way to do it. The unassigned are the dollars above and beyond that. All of those collectively have impacts on how credit agencies look at and evaluate the city. And so all three are important, but the most quote unquote flexible are the unassigned fund balance dollars that are outside the charter and the policy that's adopted by code.
And one quick other question, that 1% that we set aside, does that accumulate each year, or do we just have to set it aside each year, but then we can spend it the next?
No, ma'am. At the end, just like all other funds, at the end of the fiscal year, it's as if that money goes away, and then we allocate another 1% for the upcoming fiscal year.
Yep.
So let's say our general fund went up, then that next year, then that 1% amount would be higher. If it went down, it would be a little bit less.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Roberto.
Oh, thank you. Boyce, going back to I guess was it 6.4 million in lost revenue that you were mentioning directly related to the virus?
Thereabouts, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so thereabouts. So is that lost revenue?
And I say that because it's not a very detailed answer from somebody that's in charge of finance, but there's all kinds of little tiny funds that are also effective. But I'm trying to get the major muscle moves here with that.
I hear you. I hear you. So what I'm interested in though is that lost revenue? Is that basically since March of of this year?
No, sir. That is from what we're predicting from July. That's for the upcoming budget that you have in front of you, July 1st going forward.
Okay.
No.
We had losses in the current fiscal year and then projected losses in the proposed budget in the future, Boyce, correct?
That's correct. I think we were taking about just over a $4.1 million hit
this year
in the FY that we're in now, which ends about 6 weeks from now. But we're projecting that $6+ million to affect us in FY 21.
Okay, so the assumption in this budget is that there'll be $6 million in lost revenue related to, reduced revenue from the virus. If that assumption is, off, and it could be, and like you mentioned, you said that, we may be coming in with some, different budget amendments during the year because, we're making assumptions on what may happen, and none of us know. But how much wiggle room do you have if those assumptions are, if it turns out to be a bigger hit than we were assuming?
Well, I mean, we can always make cuts. In fact, we've made some cuts. The mayor sent out a memo. I don't know, it's been within the past 6 to 8 weeks where, departments are following that. We've got I'll call it a soft hiring freeze in effect right now. That saves money. It basically overtime is verboten unless you get approval from a member of the cabinet. And we spend a significant amount of overtime per year for various reasons. So, I mean, there's cuts we can take to keep ourselves in good standing. And some of those cuts are already in effect. And in fact, somebody, I want to say Councilwoman Testerman asked me sometime earlier this week, well, how much did we think we'd be saving from those cuts? And tell you the truth, we don't have the empirical data on it right now. So I just really can't, I'm hesitant to throw a number out there. But we've got some good spending curtailment in place. And I think that will go a long way to helping us if our projections were too liberal.
Councilman Roberto, let me also add the reason, Councilwoman Fugit, I see your hand, you have a question. So Councilman Roberto, the reason, I mean, one of the key factors to think about is we do have the 20% reserve. We don't want to tap into that, but if we had to, those are there for critical emergencies. The reason we set those aside would be for dire situations. And so we don't have a firm grasp on what shortfalls will be realized. We've tried to make good predictions. I think Boyce, working with our financial advisors, working with other CFOs, Mr. Caldwell, they've done a good job so far. They've been spot on. We are still waiting for information from the state. That is the most critical revenue shortfall that we really are waiting on the state to provide good information to us on that. And Boyce and his team and Mr. Caldwell and others are waiting on that. And the state has said they're still working on projections. And so, but again, I think the fact that we have policies like our fund balance policy that previous councils and administrations put in place, we do have an ability to take significant hits, but there are impacts on our bond rating for that. There are the credit agencies, how they would view that if we tapped into those. So, but I think the answer is we do have reserves, and we will continue to monitor the state, but we have good policies in place to continue to provide those core services. And like Mr. Evans said, we can always cut back more if needed.
Right. Go ahead.
Just to jump onto that, Mr. Braceman and the state gave some information as earlier this week. Basically, it had to do with sales tax, and the numbers at the state level that it came in short actually corresponded pretty well with ours.
Yeah.
So I was happy about that. I'll be taking this month by month, but yeah, that was good news.
Well, and I think the key point when we're talking general at this stage is, and I think you've both already kind of talked about this, is that there is unassigned fund balance that's out there that if these assumptions are not correct, and in an extreme emergency that you could access. Obviously, we don't want to, and hopefully it's not necessary to even go that way. But I think it is important, especially when we're looking at this general overview, to talk about there are funds there, unassigned funds that could be tapped if they needed to be.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel very I'm very confident in the work that Boyce and his team have done. I'm on a weekly call with the other COOs from the Big Four. And when I look at where we are positioned compared to the other big cities, we are in a very good position. The fact that we're able to absorb healthcare costs for our employees, the fact that the 2.5% increase is still in the proposed budget. We haven't had to come back to council thinking we needed to pull that. Those are things that other municipalities are not even considering right now. So we do have reserves, and I think we've done a good job. So, all right. I think Ms. Fugit.
Yes, thank you. Couple of questions. Since I'm new to this, if we had a horrible situation and we had to go into fund balance, I assume that comes back to councils to approve or does the city just take directly out of fund balance? That's just a mechanic.
Well, there would be a budget amendment if we had to
Okay,
make a
so that-
significant change. I mean, if there was a, I mean, I think there are emergency powers if there was a situation that warranted some sort of immediate expenditure, but a budget amendment would come back to council, Mr. Evans, if we had a
Yeah.
major change in the proposed budget.
That is correct, ma'am.
Okay.
Once you approve, I'm hoping you do approve, but once you all approve the FY21 budget, I mean, if we have to adjust that for something like that, then it would come back to you.
Right.
Ultimate approval in terms of a budget ordinance amendment.
Well, I mean, the emergency sort of thing is what I think about what happened down the road to Chattanooga. A tornado, a natural disaster hits you. You've got to access some funds because you can't plan for that. My next question, Boyce, is in the assumptions for lost revenue. Is that only sales tax, or are we also thinking about uncollectible property taxes?
Ma'am, we did that. We made up a bunch of assumptions on really what I'll call market-driven sources of revenue, primarily based on consumer spending.
Okay.
State shared sales tax, local option sales tax, gas tax because the amount you drive or don't drive. Those are some of the big ones, but there
Okay.
was also others. We looked at, how much are our golf courses and our convention center and our Coliseum and all that going to make or not make based on the situation. Tell you the truth, there's a discussion amongst finance directors, various places where some are saying that they think they'll get less property tax in than they have in the past. My view is it may go down some, but I would see it as nominal, frankly, because some of the folks that don't have much money to begin with, if you will, they've got smaller pieces of property. More of them may fall into the delinquent pile, if you will, but the folks that own larger properties that we're getting the majority of our money from on property taxes, they're probably still going to be okay, and they're going to want to pay their taxes because of all penalties and so forth that they'd have to.
I agree. They'll pay their property taxes if their tenants can pay them.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's sort of my domino effect sort of thing is small businesses go out of business, they can't pay their rent, then will the big businesses. I don't think I just asked. So yes, you did consider it. That may be one of those things that is an adjustment. I agree with you too. It may more likely be delinquent, which will hurt cash flow, but I just think that might factor in.
It's an area to watch. I mean, I agree.
It's fluid. I think if we see, if we saw a big spike and we went into the fall with, continued economic stress, and we went significantly longer with people unemployed, I think we would need to reevaluate. So, but at this point, people generally pay their property taxes. We saw that through the recession. And I think, that foreclosures did go up, but
it takes a minute for that to happen. It does.
We usually see the impacts of downturns later, 6 to 12 months into it versus on the front end. So at this point, we've not projected significant decreases in that revenue source.
Yeah, it may not hit this property. It may not hit this property tax season. It may hit the following year if businesses don't recover.
And it depends it depends on how the recovery works. There's some folks that say it'll recover in an L-shaped manner, which would be a longer duration recession before it comes back. I'm more of a mind of the U-shaped recovery.
I'm hoping.
Yes, it does go lower, but then it comes back, not just immediately, but comes back strong. So we're looking at, our forecasts were more based on a U-shaped recovery.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for Boyce to Councilwoman Reiner?
Just pretty quickly, Boyce. So by our local option sales tax is how we give a contribution to the city schools, or I'm sorry, the county schools.
Yes.
And so we're anticipating the local option sales tax to be decreased. But nothing changes about that. We aren't making any plans to, is there anything different going on because of that?
No, it's the split on the local option sales tax between what the county and the city gets, no change there. We're just looking at our portion being about $1 million less than what we had previously estimated it to be.
I think Councilwoman Ryder, you highlight an incredibly important issue for our community, though, which is the revenue sources for our school system are going to be heavily impacted. So our split won't change, but those dollars coming in, we don't know what that the school system is going to have a major hit. And so I think that's a community-wide issue, but obviously it's an important factor for the city as we move through the next 12 months.
Okay, so no conversation or proposals or anything on the table to address that anticipated shortfall. That's what I'm asking.
No,
Okay.
nobody has addressed that.
Okay, thank you. And then one other quick question, the hall tax. So you decrease the anticipated revenue for that going into this budget because we knew that that's going to be a shortfall from what you anticipated. And then next year, 21, 22, the next budget cycle is the last of the hall tax.
This coming year, FY 2021, the budget that you have in front of you,
yes,
that's the last year we will get a dime from the hall tax.
Yeah, it's over this year.
Starting the following one, FY 21, 22, we know what we'll get, which is big goose egg.
Okay. Oh, okay. I misread here on page 21. I get it now. I'm gonna work on my reading skills.
No, I get it confused myself, man.
Okay, this is it.
I have one follow-up question on the hall tax. Looking at I assume that going away is incorporated in the assumptions for the capital expenditures 22, 23, and 24 in our plan here.
Yeah, we've known the hall tax was going to go away for a long time. So yes, sir, that's part of our thinking just in general every day. And it's terrible because I've seen years where we've got as much as 13 million out of that. I'm not good.
All right. Vice Mayor McKenzie, I think, oh, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Testerman, more questions for Boyce and I.
Actually, well, and I don't know if the mayor is still on or not. And I talked to Boyce, but I kind of want to, and this is kind of switching gears from simply because I don't see it on the agenda, but I kind of wanted to get a better understanding. We've got the 1.7 million in agency grants and wanted to know, can somebody walk me through that process as to who and how those agencies are selected, how the dollar allocations are decided, and what type of reporting structure do we have for these nonprofits as an accountability measure?
Yeah, how about I do this? Let me text Mayor Concanon, unless Ms. Gill would like to jump in on that. But there is a process, there is reporting. I think either Ms. Searle or Ms. Concanon will want to address that. I'm going to look up at Aaron and Stephanie. Does that seem appropriate? There's the mayor. Mayor, did you hear the question from Councilwoman Testerman?
I didn't. I was taking a phone call, but is it about community agency grants?
Yes,
It
she was asking about process, accountability, how they're distributed, those decisions, and then how they report back to us.
Well, this is probably the part of the budget I know best because I used to have the job that Ms. Searle has now under Mayor Rogero. So the process is there's an annual grant application and people can apply and it's posted and open to all applicants. The application includes requirements to show what other funding sources you have state, federal, public or private. You're required to have been in existence for 5 years, to, have your 501c3. You're required to operate within the city of Knoxville. I mean, maybe not exclusively, like Second Harvest operates within the city of Knoxville, but also across the region. We require that you show the people you serve, all the your administrative costs versus the cost for your programs. The requirement also is that, the city doesn't fund sort of startup costs, because we're supposed to be funding organizations that are stable enough to, to continue and survive with or without the city funds. So, and supposed to show what you do that's, perhaps unique, or what this program is that particularly serves the city of Knoxville, whether in a cultural sense, the art museum is a good example, or in a social service sense, like Connect Ministry is one recipient that gets, that does services for formerly incarcerated people to help them re-enter the community and in a successful way, so they can get job training and access to housing and that sort of thing. So there's an application deadline. I think the window from the application has stayed pretty similar from year to year, and people have to turn it in. I think, they have 3 weeks or so to do it. And then once they're turned in, Ms. Searle sort of, allocates, not allocates them, just sort of organizes them and reviews them, and then brings recommendations to me. And also, I think we had a review session with just Ms. Searle and me, but also, we worked with the budget team as a whole, with Boyce and my deputies, just to go over it as well. This year, just like the rest of the budget, it was pretty much a, pretty steady approach. Like, we didn't want to cut, these nonprofits are also facing big cuts to their own budgets and sources of revenue. Some of the arts organizations, can't do performances. So our goal was to, if we had the funds, to maintain, maintenance or status quo. And we, I think for the most part did that. And as far as accountability, there's a mid-year report due and it asks, we try to strike a balance between not being so onerous that some of the applicants are fledgling, all volunteer run organizations. And so we don't want to have so many hoops to jump through that it precludes people from applying, but we also want to make sure to have accountability. So whether you have a full-time paid grant writer or someone who's, it's an all volunteer organization, you can do it. So the mid-year report, basically asks, as I recall, 3 questions like, have you used your funds? If so, what have you used them for? If you haven't used them all, what are your plans for using them? And depending on the size of the grant, if it's under 6,000, you get, the funds go out all in one lump sum. If it's greater than that, the checks are issued quarterly. And so if you don't file your mid-year report, you don't get your subsequent checks. And if you don't fulfill the reporting requirements, you're not eligible to apply for a grant in the subsequent year.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer everything on agency
Yeah,
grants?
I think so.
Okay, thanks.
At this point, I think I'm followed by Miss Erin Gill in the agenda.
Thank you, Boyce. Vice Mayor, are we ready to proceed?
We are. Thank you.
Right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for always being adaptable. And I echo the mayor's comments that I think we'd all prefer to be in person, but seeing everyone's faces is at least a good compromise. So I'm first up, and my team, who many of you have met, some who are new and some who are returning and long been at the city, are excited to talk with you today. I wanted to just kind of start out with kind of a general overview of what I call the policy branch of the org chart. This is, a side of the org chart that, really works very closely day to day with the mayor, of course, the deputy team, and we are really working to make sure that our strategic priorities as an administration carry throughout all the work that our city departments are doing. Under my team, you have communications led by Kristen Farley. Kristen's dad unfortunately passed away this week, so Eric Breland will be here to talk to the communications portion of the budget. We also have Charles Lomax, who is the Director of Community Empowerment, and that's a little bit of a revisioning of the Department of Community Relations that Abbas Reed formerly led, and so we're excited to have Charles on board. One of the advantages to bringing Charles into that policy branch is the integration of some of the equity work and the inclusion work that Charles has been leading, and that community relations group has been working on for a long time. And so really this idea of empowerment and weaving those things throughout not only the policy portion of the organization, but also throughout everything we do. So we are excited to have Charles on board. One of the things we also did with the new administration is move the Office of Neighborhoods into Community Empowerment Division. So Debbie Sharp will be here today to address that. A couple other kind of just key points. You'll hear from sustainability and special events. Those have historically been part of the policy branch. But we've also moved Knoxville area transit, as well as the Center for Service Innovation and 311 into the policy branch. And again, that's a reflection of the fact that we really consider both transit as well as the data and the community engagement that 311 has on a daily basis with our residents as a key point of strategic alignment, that we can make sure we're both hearing from our residents and also integrating the feedback from those 311 and 211 call lines into the decisions that we're making as a city government. Also on my team are Carter Hall, who is our policy and strategic project manager, and Fiona McAnally, who's our state and federal legislative affairs. They won't be here today to talk to specific budget items because they really fall within kind of a broader policy element. They don't have a specific budget, but I'm certainly available to answer questions about anything you have related to their work. So in terms of the budget, you'll see the staffing and the operating fund, with the exception of CAT, in the administration portion of the proposed budget. So that's where pretty much my staff fall. So we're all in that kind of what we call that administrative bracket that I believe appears first in your budget packet. Our strengths are really in our people. So we are not a capital intensive branch, with the exception, of course, of CAT, which is a separate line item, separate kind of division. And really what we're looking at this year for our proposed budget is a maintenance of staffing levels. So there's very few minimal new operating proposed. We recognize kind of the austerity of the year that we're in. But again, you know, with the staff that we have and the strategic really mission that all of us will continue pushing on some of those core administrative values, including clean and resilient future, housing, and, you know, supporting the community empowerment work, as well as, of course, thinking around how we can support the operations side and the economic development sides of the organization with Ms. Welch and Mr. Brace working closely with me and I with them. So anyway, thank you for letting me just provide a few introductory remarks. I'm happy to answer any general questions. And then, of course, we have folks on deck to talk through particular elements of their budgets, with communications coming first after my remarks. So any general questions that you'd like to ask me before we hand it over to some of our individual department leaders? Ms. Parker?
When we met, I can't remember which meeting it was, but it was a lunch meeting before a city council meeting when we reviewed the org chart. There was a commitment made at that time to putting Title VI more prominently on the chart. And I don't think that change has been made. Is there still a commitment to that?
Well, so we updated after that, I believe it was January or February, it was early in the term. The org chart that I've actually got online, that was updated February 19th. And what we've done is we've made it clear that the equity and inclusion box, which of course is led by Tasha Harris, is our Title VI coordinator. So Tasha is receiving those Title VI requests, and that Title VI coordinator role is indicated on the org chart itself.
So y'all meant just the asterisk would be added, not the actual title back up into the chart, or has that been changed?
I mean, that's the way that we chose to address it.
Okay.
To make it more obvious that that role was very much on the org chart and part of our organization. All right. Vice Mayor McKenzie, do you want to shift over to our departmental leaders? And I believe Eric Vreeland is on deck to represent communications.
Yes, thank you.
Eric?
Good morning, everyone. This is Eric Vreeland. I'm the Deputy Director. Can you guys hear me? Okay. As Aaron said, I'm the Deputy Communications Director. Kristen Farley's father passed this week, so I'm here in her place. Normally, if we were at the main assembly room, I'd put a face to all the names, but we're a small department, so I'll verbally mention who all does city communications. We're a staff of 5, so in addition to Kristen and myself, let's see, we have Tracy McDonald. She is the city's webmaster, photographer, and videographer. Tracy's kind of our lifeline of institutional knowledge. She dates back to the Haslam administration, and she has all sorts of technical talent. She's remade the website a couple of times, and she puts together the Mayor's Minute video that comes out every week. We have Paige Travis, who's a communications specialist. Paige, like myself, embeds in some different city departments to help get the good news out and explain things that are happening kind of at the departmental level. She has a knack and specializes in social media messaging. And then Paige also handles hundreds of requests for certificates and proclamations that come through the mayor's office every year. So she covers a lot of ground. And the 5th person on our team is Dan Fry. Dan is our graphic artist. He came on board more than a year ago. We always thought we needed a graphic artist. And then once we had one, you realize, oh my goodness, why didn't we do this before now? Because it just gives you so much more professionalism and an ability to communicate things. If you see the infographics that are COVID-19 related that go out every day, through city social media and on our website, Dan's responsible for those. So that's our team of 5. I wanted to open up for questions in a minute, but just give you a real quick overview of what our department does. And then I think the best way of kind of illustrating what we do is to give a real short explanation of how the last couple months have gone. So communications provides 24/7 information to the public in a variety of ways. We craft literally thousands of media releases, advisories, blog posts, social media posts, videos, and infographics during the course of a year. The latter, infographics and videos, are increasingly important, and we think an effective tool for reaching people. We also realize communications is interactive. It's not one directional. So we respond hourly to questions from the media, questions or concerns from the media, stakeholders, city residents, business owners, our peers at different levels of government or other cities across the country. And council members, you all are always welcome to contact Kristen or I or any of our team if there's anything we can do for you. I think you know that. So just to kind of succinctly give you an illustration of what we do, I think talking about that pandemic is a good example. During the last couple of months, when people want and need accurate, credible information, we think city communications has delivered clarity. We put out helpful facts and explanations of policy decisions. There's been a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation. There's been different levels of government with different orders and different leanings. A lot of stuff out there, and people look to us for clarity and for credible sources. So from what we've done through all our platforms over the last couple of months, we have reached an audience of hundreds of thousands of people. And that's a good thing. They go to us because they can say, oh, the city of Knoxville or CDC or the health department, they're putting this out, and there's some stamp of credibility to that. More importantly, with some of the messaging we've done, we've tried to be real proactive on a grassroots level to help get the word out to families, how they can stay healthy and safe, and ways that we as friends and neighbors can help one another. We think that's been very important, and it's been good to be able to do that kind of service. That's really a very short overview. I thank you, Council, for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to help answer. I think I lost my connection.
We're still here.
Eric,
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. Oh, that's awful.
Sounds like Star Trek or something is happening.
Gosh, that's not good. Hang on.
You can mute it, Eric. We'll
Yeah. All right.
so I just was looking at it. So you guys went down one staffing position, Eric, and I just wondered what impact that was to you guys. And what the job duties were that shifted. That's all.
Did you get that question, Eric?
I think I've lost my audio. I'm sorry. I can't hear. I'm sorry. Let me log back in.
I can answer that if you want me to.
Sure, that would be great.
We shifted a position from communications to policy, and that's Carter Hall's in that policy role right now. And so, and also Fiona shifted from communications to policy. So what we've asked to do is, our policy team does some writing that ends up helping the communications team. So our communications team did lose a position, and that was unfortunately Mary Leidig, who did great work, but we just had a reconfiguration, and luckily our communication team is very versatile, and Eric gave a great overview. Thank you, Eric. I heard it all. I know you can't.
I'm back on audio, but no video.
Oh, okay.
I think I can hear now. So
you can add what you want, but there's been a lot of sort of shifting of trying to communicate in a little more with like video and visuals in addition to the great writing. The infographics have been, I think, really helpful during, particularly as we need to share information in simplified, easy ways for people who don't want to get, bogged down in reading the details of like CDC specific guidance. They just want a picture and know what, know how to follow the guidelines. So, Eric, do you want to speak? Councilwoman Ryder asked how you guys might have shifted responsibilities with the loss of one position.
I think the mayor described it pretty well. Most of us have had, like Dan Fry has had extensive background in the private sector with multiple employers, and the other four of us have all worked in media. So there's a lot of cross training, and we're still embedded with all the city departments. I think we're just working more efficiently, and I think the mayor kind of alluded to this. The infographics we think is an effective way to get simple messages out to people and easy to digest. So that has replaced some of the other forms that we'd use to put information out. It's kind of a mix of messaging because different people absorb information in different ways. But we've kind of diversified, and I think we're doing pretty well with 5 people. Kristen, coming from television, brought a wealth of new skill sets into communications. So that's helped a lot also.
Right. Thank you. I do think the graphics have been really helpful during the ongoing pandemic and getting that messaging out. Thanks.
Good. I just wanted to clarify too, Mayor mentioned that we, Fiona McInall used to serve as deputy director of that department, and she's now 100% focused on the legislative affairs. So that used to be a function that was within communications. So if you recall, it was communications and government relations. And so what we've done is we've really taken that government relations piece and given it its own home so that Fiona is much more able to engage on a daily basis with our state delegation as well as our federal partners at the federal and state level. So we think that that has helped each of those kind of pieces really focus in on what they're really needing to do on a daily basis and have that, I think, very intentional focus from the staffs on both sides of that. Thank you, Eric.
Oh, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Eric? Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We'll move to community empowerment.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Mayor Kincannon, Deputy Gill, Vice Mayor McKenzie, members of council, and to everyone else present, good morning. My name is Dr. Charles F. Lomax Jr., and I have the privilege and the pleasure of serving as the Director of Community Empowerment for this great city of Knoxville. Formerly identified as Community Relations, our department exists to promote, support, and empower the citizens and neighborhoods of Knoxville to create an equitable and harmonious community for all who call our great city home. While longstanding in its labor as a department, we are in the process of presenting and promoting the newest iteration, which is community empowerment. And so under the umbrella of community empowerment, I'm surrounded by an amazing team of individuals who are dedicated to the work that we do, including Tasha Harris, who is our Diversity and Inclusion Officer, Ola Blackman McBride, who serves as our Administrative Assistant and is also currently the Interim Park Director, Debbie Sharp and Eden Slater from the Office of Neighborhoods. And we also have a part-time temporary position which is specifically for our neighborhoods conference, which is Courtney Roberts Durrett. And we also have Bailey Walker, who is our AmeriCorps Vista, and we typically have at least one intern from the University of Tennessee as well. And so also under our umbrella, there are 2 additional positions which are currently vacant that we're in the process of looking to fill as we speak. And so also under this umbrella, I mentioned our Diversity and Inclusion Officer, which also encompasses our Title VI initiative. And this is to ensure that the city of Knoxville and our neighboring partners and entities are in compliance with all of our standards as it relates to equity and with Title VI. We also have our Police Advisory and Review Committee, which exists to strengthen relationships between the citizens of Knoxville and the Knoxville Police Department. It's extremely important that we have citizen-led police oversight, and this is a voluntary part that we have from citizens in our community. We also have the Office of Neighborhoods, which I am dubbing the Office of Neighborhood Empowerment, since they're now under the empowerment, community empowerment piece. And so they exist to promote local to promote resident-led and resident-controlled communities that are supported by their local government. We have approximately 200 active neighborhood associations and/or groups within the city of Knoxville. And we are working hard to build relationships within the community and to make sure that our communities have exactly what they need in order to thrive and to be successful. As I mentioned, part of what we do is extremely involved in the community. And so we look for citizen involvement to be an integral component to our department. And so with our various offices, we have a number of different committees and boards that are in place to help us with this effort. And so we have also included is our Neighborhood Advisory Council, which is composed of 15 citizens that again volunteer their time and efforts in order to help us to go forward as a city. We have our Police Advisory and Review Committee, which is composed of 7 members. We have our Mayor's Roundtable of Youth Serving Organizations, which currently has about 25 partners that we work with throughout the city. And then we also have our Equity Committee, which is internal to the city of Knoxville, and that has approximately 20 individuals that have been present and represented in the past as well. Just a couple of highlights of some of the things that we do in our program, or in our department rather. Of course, as you are all familiar, we have our Neighborhoods Conference, which is an annual gathering of the city offices, neighborhood associations, groups and entities, nonprofits from around the city that come together, that normally sees about participation of 500 or so. Unfortunately, this year, in light of COVID-19, we had to cancel our neighborhood conference, and we're not able to do that. But that's always a big component of what we do as a city. Additionally, we attended last year approximately 218 neighborhood meetings where we were either represented as staff or we were the guest speakers. We issued approximately $22,000 in neighborhood small grants. Our Police Advisory Review Committee heard and dealt with approximately 85 cases. And both Debbie Sharp and Ola Blackman McBride are here to answer additional questions in regards to their individual programs. We also train key personnel within the city to ensure that all departments and appropriate staff were in compliance with Title VI, and our Equity Committee is also up and running and is in the process of developing and implementing an equity plan for the city of Knoxville that we look to roll out and to hopefully be a model for other entities within the city of Knoxville as well. And so with that, I will stop talking and will do my best to answer any questions that you may have.
I have questions. And honestly, I couldn't even keep up with everything that you just listed. And I'm kind of out of breath trying to take it all in. But that is an incredible amount of work for one department to try to cover, from the different committees involving community leaders whose work has to be, help facilitate to the actual day in and day out work, to the investigations. And am I correct that all of that work is done by how many staff? Just, can you repeat it for me? Because I can't say it out loud.
Yeah.
It just won't come out of my mouth.
That's okay. It takes my breath away too sometimes. We have Tasha Harris in our department, who is our diversity and equity officer. We have Debbie Sharp and Eden Slater, who are in the Office of Neighborhoods. We have Ola Blackman McBride, who is our administrative assistant and currently operating as our interim executive director of Park. And then we have two positions that we're in the process of filling at the moment, which would be our park director and also our community engagement manager, which is going to be taking the place of our community outreach manager. The community outreach manager previously oversaw the program and the initiative that was Save Our Sons. Save Our Sons, as it existed, is no longer in existence. However, we are still dedicated to the work that was being done. And so with that, we're in the process of attempting to roll out what we're calling the Empower Knox initiative. And so that is still in its formative stages, but with the Empower Knox initiative, we are still, as a city, dedicated to safe and healthy and thriving communities for our young people. And whereas Save Our Sons primarily focused on our young men within communities, we are now looking to somewhat expand the reach of that, and not only dealing with our young men, but trying to meet our young men and our young women and trying to reach them at an earlier age as well. And so we're looking to build upon the work, the much needed work that Save Our Sons did, and expand upon that in practical ways that will be of benefit to the community.
Gotcha. Just one thing I wanted to lift up in this part of the budget is that just to do the investigations properly that we need this office to do, especially park investigations, Title VI, all of the above. And then also to engage with the community, organize, citywide events with and for the community. To do it properly and to not set our folks up for failure. We definitely need more staffing in this area. And I think that you all should have received a letter that a community member sent in about parks specifically, and how they've had, very positive interactions with city staff and park staff throughout the years, but it's just become clear that one person can't do everything. I mean, it's unimaginable that one person can do all of those investigations and address all of those complaints on top of doing trainings and doing community outreach and trying to educate the community on everything. And so, if we are making a true commitment to these areas, we got to fund them correctly, or the work cannot be done fully as we would like it to be seen. So I would like for us to have explore what structures other cities have in place. There have been a few examples shared with us on City Council today. And I encourage everyone to read through that email and see how other cities, just for park alone, have committed, 5 staff positions to do the work that is needed to truly address these issues. So that's just one thing I wanted to lift up, because there's an incredible amount of work being done by our Office on Neighborhoods, by Park, by all of these programs within this office, and I hope that we can fund it fully so the work can be done to the fullest extent.
Ms. Parker, I want to jump in because
Councilmember Parker.
Yeah, I also I think we all can appreciate just the tremendous amount of work that a very small and nimble group of folks do. And as someone who also used to lead a very small department, I think one of the important things that we recognize, and part of, again, what the policy side of the org chart is all about, is making sure that this is not just something that one department has to do, but that rather it's a citywide effort, and that we have folks within all of our departments who are understanding the nuances around topics like sustainability and equity, and making sure that they're working hand in hand with the organizations that actually have that title to make sure that we're adopting those types of practices throughout our administration. And so you'll see departments, for example, like public service, that really end up doing some of the work like Second Chances program, and in the sustainability world, there are facilities folks that are implementing on the ground energy improvements, and they're doing so in full coordination with those departments like Mr. Lomax leads, that are very much rooted in that kind of strategic definition of what the city needs to be doing, and then working to implement those with other departments. So I definitely agree. This is an area where we hope to grow over time, and we have a tremendous amount of work that gets done by a very skilled and small group of people, but they are also supported across the organization by members in other departments as well.
Well, also, and just keep in mind, when it comes to the park director has responsibilities established by charter. So those are responsibilities that cannot be shared, across departments. And so when we have investigators in place like that, we need to make sure that they, we have the staff needed to carry out those investigations. I don't believe, based on our charter, that someone from the communications department, for instance, would have those investigative powers.
Sure, specific to park, I agree with you. There's some particular charter boundaries that we have to draw there. Fully appreciate that.
Director Lomax, good morning. While we're kind of talking about general from community empowerment, I don't know that I have a question so much as just to reiterate some points that have been made. This group that we're talking about under your purview is probably one of the most forward-facing in the community. And certainly, I know for myself, but I think for many of the council members, you go to a community meeting, you go to a neighborhood meeting, you're going to see presentations and discussions from this group of really good servants. And some of those meetings can be very late at night, and some of them can go on for a long time and can cover some more complicated topics. But I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for your work on this and all of the folks in your department for their dedication and for being that forward facing group that community groups, neighborhood groups can turn to and have present information to. So just wanted to say thank you to everyone.
Thank you very much as well, sir. That is absolutely true. We are often on the ground in certain areas, and sometimes we are the first face of government that some people see. And so we're mindful of that in the work that we do. And we seek to make sure that representation is a good representation, and that all citizens within the city, regardless of where they are, as we are interacting with them, are feeling and being empowered.
Mr. Lomax, I just have a question and definitely concur with the comments that my colleagues have shared to this point. I know that currently the park director position is open. Do we have a time frame when that position may be permanently filled?
Yes, ma'am. I worked with a wonderful committee who helped in the process of interviews and hearing those that applied for that particular position. And so the committee has made recommendations. I've been waiting on the committee to finalize and to get all of their recommendations in so that I can compile that and get that onto the desk of the mayor. And so at the point that is on the mayor's desk, she will be able to, at her desire and pace, to go through those recommendations, to reach out to the individuals that are being recommended and to interview them, or whatever process she chooses to take. And then the decision will be hers as far as who the next park director will be.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add on to that, Vice Mayor McKenzie, I do look forward to getting the recommendations of the committee that Mr. Lomax has been, coordinating. And once I get those recommendations, I'll review them and maybe conduct interviews of the people that have been, that move forward in the process. I do want to move expeditiously, but also carefully. It's a really important appointment, and I want to make sure we have the right person. So I definitely agree it's important, and I want to move quickly and look forward to the recommendations coming my way in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you both.
And one thing that I will say about that process, this is a mayoral appointment. And so we wanted to have it to be a public process just for the sake of transparency. And so that we could have input from those who were a part of the committee. But at the same time, the ultimate decision does lie in the hands of the mayor.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, there are no additional questions for Mr. Lomax. We'll move to the next item on our agenda. And
Just as a point of clarification, are you wanting to hear anything directly from Ms. Sharp or Ms. Blackman McBride, or would you like to move over to sustainability?
Yeah, well, I think we would definitely like to hear from both of them. So.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Ola Blackman McBride, and as Director Lomax shared, I'm serving as interim director for PARC since April the 6th. I did want to take a few moments just to talk about PARC and what has been happening with PARC since COVID-19. We have completed our first quarter in 2020, which ended on March the 30th. We have 11 cases that have been presented to PARC for review. Unfortunately, our April meeting was canceled. We're working very closely to reschedule that for June. But I want to really emphasize that during this COVID period, it's important that the citizens of Knoxville have an opportunity to reach PARC if they need PARC. So we're continuing to promote the online complaint form. However, we are taking phone calls, taking complaints over the phone. We're doing whatever is necessary to make sure that citizens who need our help, that we are there for them. We are also, this week, we started a training with the Knoxville Police Department recruits, the cultural competency training. There are 3 sessions that one was on Tuesday, one is Friday, and we have a panel discussion at the end of the month. So we're continuing to provide training, connect with the community, and making sure that the services of PARC is still in effect.
I had a question.
Yes.
Who is leading the training, the cultural competency training?
The first training that was held on Tuesday, Lieutenant Josh Schaefer of the Knoxville Police Department did a section on couples competency, and PARC participated in regards to doing a session on stereotyping. On tomorrow, Clarence Bond, our former PARC director, has agreed to come back and do a session on understanding cultural bias. So that will be on tomorrow. On the 26th, we bring in community individuals representing diverse populations, African American community, the Muslim community, the elderly, the disability. We have about 6 different groups that we like to target. We do have some challenges as with COVID-19, having to use Zoom to do some of the panel training, but we're trying to be creative. But we really, for that panel discussion, reach out to the community. We want to bring the community in to speak to the recruits. I have attended the training in the past, and one of the feedbacks, one of the most important feedback that we heard is they like that panel discussion and they like those small group discussions.
Yeah. One thing that I will be pushing for, and I've pushed for it since before being elected, is that we properly fund a cultural competency training. My background and experience has told me if you do not do a cultural competency training correctly, you only reinforce stereotypes. You only reaffirm the bias that's being held. And oftentimes when folks do not feel comfortable talking about topics of race or oppression, they work extra hard to make the audience member, the training participant, more comfortable. And when you get into that mindset of trying to make the folks in the room more comfortable, you end up reinforcing some of the stereotypes they've come into the room with. And so I would really encourage us to invest resources into our training so we can bring in folks who do this day in and day out. We have those resources at the University of Tennessee. And I, from personal experience can tell you it's needed. We need to make that investment.
Thank you.
Ms. McBride, a couple of questions and comment. I do agree with Councilmember Parker that this training is critically important. I'd also like to make a recommendation that when it is offered, and of course, doing it virtually is not optimal, but our situation and our world is a little bit different right now. But I would like to ask when the cultural competency trainings are scheduled for any council members that would be interested in participating in the training, if we could get that schedule and be able to sign up for the training, because I do think that that would be beneficial for council members who are interested to participate in that training as well. So if you could maybe put that as a takeaway and follow back up with us. And then also, if you have this information available, I know that you'd mentioned that we're getting phone calls that are coming in. Do you know on average how many phone calls that we're getting with complaints or concerns per week or daily?
I've tracked this since April the 6th. We're averaging really around 10 calls a week, calls that we're getting through the park office. Some of them are more so informational. We receive calls, people needing to know who to call because of the noise, and we do refer them to the appropriate individuals. We have received calls of people who I will say that probably those that have had issues with law enforcement, most have been connected to the sheriff department. As you're aware, PART does not have jurisdiction over the sheriff department. We have on yesterday, I actually had two that calls that came in, and I'm following up with. One I have not been able to reach, which according to the information that he left on the voicemail, it is a legitimate complaint that needs to be addressed. But we've had total probably over the 6-week period about 20. Some weeks there's been 1 or 2. Last week we had quite a bit. But we are getting calls, and we have received 1 online complaint.
Okay. Okay. Have any other questions, comments? Can't see. Okay. If not, thank you very much, Ms. McBride. At this point, had a couple of people who have asked for a brief break. So I know Office of Neighborhoods, I'm sure there may be a lot of questions and comments as well. So if we will, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. I'm seeing the time as 10:17. So if we could all be back in 10 minutes, which would be 10:27. Thank you. Okay, team, I'm trying to wait till I see everybody. Majority of our team members back. Hi, Debbie, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Vice Mayor McKenzie?
I'm doing great today. Yeah, doing great. Be better if we were in person, but oh well. Okay, we're going to maybe give another 2 minutes and then we'll get started. Hopefully we'll have everyone back by then. Okay, Debbie, we're gonna go ahead and reconvene and get started. So we will go ahead and turn it over to you to talk to us about Office of Neighborhoods, please.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor. Gosh, I almost said Kincannon, Vice Mayor McKenzie. Good to see you all, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about Office of Neighborhoods and what we're doing. As most of you know, we are the liaisons between the city departments and the neighborhood organizations. As well as that, we also work with individuals who want to organize a neighborhood in an unorganized area. So we do that as well. As Director Lomax said, you heard some of the things that we do. And along with that, we collaborate with the departments to help with anti-blight programs. We collaborate with departments to help neighborhoods do a multitude of things, as well as collaborating with groups and organizations, nonprofits in the community. We have consultation services for neighborhoods. We help them provide mediation. We will help new organizations form. We've helped create and print thousands of flyers to help get the word out about neighborhood activities. We have a weekly neighborhood advisory that goes out to help keep folks informed about anything going on with the city, anything going on with neighborhoods. As you all know too, we do go to lots and lots of neighborhood meetings, community meetings. The statistics that Director Lomax told you were from 2019. And so unfortunately, I think 2020's numbers will be a little bit lower. But with that said, we started shifting a little bit this year, and with COVID-19, Eden Slater has headed up working with other groups to help with senior services, and Patricia Robledo and I have worked with immigrant and refugee populations to make sure that folks are not falling through the cracks. So even though the numbers of meetings have gone down, we're still doing what we can to help the community get the needs met. We also have our grants program, the Neighborhood Traffic Safety Program. We have training workshops of any topic you can imagine, whatever the community needs or whatever the different departments would like for us to help get the word out about. We help with those. And then of course our conference. Most of you have been to the conference either as a candidate or as a council member, and so we appreciate all of your input there. Also, we could not do the work that we do without the fantastic collaborations that we have from the different departments. Anytime I call a different department saying, hey, a neighborhood is in need of this, this, or this, they really work well with us to help make sure those things happen. So with that, I guess that's about all I had as a little speech. So if you have any questions, please feel free.
Hey Debbie, I have a quick question. Are you guys able, or has any of the neighborhoods? I know a lot of them take a hiatus over the summer months, but any of them trying to do Zoom meetings to try and make up for the gap of missing their in-person meetings? I know our neighborhood group has been doing them, but I didn't know if some neighborhoods have been able to reach out to you guys, and is that assistance you can give them? I mean, in whatever capacity you could make that happen.
Sure, yes. We have heard that some neighborhoods are doing Zoom meetings or WebEx meetings or the different formats. And one of the suggestions that Eden Slater came up with was maybe we could do a quick Zoom 101 to help neighborhoods who might not have that ability. So we're looking at what kinds, if this continues, you know, what kinds of things can we do to help neighborhoods still stay connected? So yes, we're looking at how to do that.
I don't have a question so far as a comment. Hey, Debbie. I just want to commend you all. Neighborhoods and different parts of the community have different needs that vary widely, and you all adapt and meet people where they are, whether it's parking studies or debates over how to handle burglaries. And I commend the breadth of skill you all bring to really diverse situations. So I'm grateful that the mayor's committed to the Office of Neighborhoods as part of this budget, but you all as people do a wonderful job. So cheers.
Thank you very much. I don't know who was first, Council Member Roberto or Testerman. I didn't see who was first.
Councilmember Testerman, go first.
Okay. Well, again, I commend, I love what you all do. I love the weekly neighborhood advisory committee report. It's great. It's thorough. It's very helpful. To Councilwoman Ryder's point, I have looked, that weekly calendar of meetings is incredibly helpful. And I've looked to see if any of them, because I know of some that have resorted to Zoom meetings, but I haven't really seen that indicated on that calendar. But my other point is too, that there are so many neighborhoods, as we know, and so many different neighborhood associations. I'm just trying to figure out a way or what suggestions you might have for more of them to utilize that calendar to document their meetings. So it's just better for us to be able to attend, and I really defer to that in order to be present. So just didn't know what your thoughts were on how we can get more of those included.
I appreciate that. We're definitely trying to reach out to neighborhoods by calling them and saying, if your meeting is canceled or you're doing it on a different format, please let us know. And we've not been hearing back from some, so I think our calendar is probably a little outdated. But we've been making a concerted effort to reach out to folks on that. But I think you bring up a good point. I would like for us to do more and try to reach out to those who aren't on the calendar and see if they'd be interested in being on it. And it's more a choice if they have regular meetings to be on there, but we can see if more folks make a proactive effort to see if folks would want to be on there. So
it's just a great tool and a great central location to get that information. So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
If I can jump in here very quickly in response to that as well. Councilmember Testament, one of the things that we're looking to do, not only just within the Office of Neighborhoods, but within our department as a whole, is building capacity in order for people, neighborhoods, and everything to meet their maximum capabilities. And one of the things that is quite obvious as you look at the neighborhood associations and groups within our city is that some are extremely active and others not so much. And so one of the things that we're hoping to do going forward is working with those that are not as active to build their capacity, to build their membership in order to get active. And Debbie also stated in her initial greetings that, we have large areas, even though we have approximately 200 neighborhood associations that are registered, we still have large areas and pockets within our city that don't have any representation in an organized association. And so those are things that, we are looking at, but that does go back to kind of some of the staffing parts and pieces of that, because, with a 2-person office as well as an AmeriCorps and an intern, it's a little difficult to do all of that. But building capacity is something that we are dedicated to doing.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, I piggyback on the comments that have been made so far and just say, outreach in neighborhoods that, have maybe had less of an active history. I think that's a great thing to be thinking of. Obviously, we have some constraints built into this budget because of the current situation we find ourselves in. And in that vein, I wanted to ask you, Debbie, about the traffic calming program. Certainly one of the really popular programs that you are facilitating, and I know you and I have talked about that program many times, and I would assume that you've heard from my colleagues about that program too, because it's pretty popular. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about where we are with that program right now and what you're looking at into the future? Because I think if I remember correctly, I don't believe there's any budgeted funds for that program in this, in this budget. Is that correct?
that is my understanding. And just to kind of give a brief overview of what's happened so far since it's been in operation, I guess. In September, I think that'll be 3 years. The first year, we were able to get 5 neighborhoods completed. The first year was starting the process. So after that, then we got 5 neighborhoods completed. This would be the second year of completing the process, getting into construction. So we're looking at 5 to 6 neighborhoods getting completed. If there were the funding for next year, we were looking at maybe having 5 to 6 ready for that year. And then beyond that, there would be 28 neighborhoods on the waiting list. If we add to that the 5 to 6 that won't be done this next year, we're looking at about 34 on the waiting list. So we haven't had a chance to really discuss this yet, but preliminarily, Eden and I kind of talked about how do we move forward, and there's still some things that can be done out of our budget. We do have the Neighborhood Traffic Safety Program education component, which we were hoping to launch right as COVID hit. One of our workshops at the conference was going to be about, going to be about that. And so it's a great program. David Massey and Don Lindsay helped us develop it. So if there's not any money, there's definitely an education piece, and there's all kinds of ideas that neighborhoods can work together to do to help try to slow traffic and help educate their neighbors and things like that. So we're thinking that we might, the folks that are on the waiting list, we can say, hey, we're here and we're ready to come talk about this program, offer them something, because I know some of them really want their speed humps, but that might be for a little while.
Hey, Councilman Roberto, this is David Brace. I think obviously as we, because of the pandemic and COVID, there are projects that we would like to put some additional dollars into, but because of the anticipated shortfalls, I would, and I'll defer to Mayor Cannon if she wants to jump in here. There are projects that if for some reason we had better projections, if we had revenues come in greater than we anticipated, I think this is one that's high on the list because of the demand and that the system is in place. But I think it's infrastructure, but it's not necessarily immediate critical infrastructure. That's why there was no additional dollars, although there are some in the current capital account.
And I would like to add some, and I'm not in the engineering department, so I don't know all the details about this, but some of the speed humps have been able to fold into a resurfacing project. That's also another avenue. Neighborhood roads that are on our waiting list that may be up for resurfacing, maybe that can be worked into the resurfacing contract. And so there are maybe some options to still getting some of this.
Yep. Thank you, Debbie.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add that this has been when I was, meeting with neighborhood groups across the city during the campaign and even subsequent to being elected. This is a really important issue to many neighborhoods across the city. And again, when our budget allows and our, just general bandwidth allows, I'm really interested in exploring more innovations in this realm. Traffic humps are not the only answer to getting people to slow down. And I've seen some real creative ways that some other cities have tried this, sometimes temporarily, sometimes once the temporary measures are in place for a while with very little capital investment, then the neighborhood can respond and say, yes, this works well, or no, that's the wrong place, or turns out we actually do want to be able to go faster here, or whatever. But I like this sort of, I'd like to explore some other ways to do it besides speed humps, because those are expensive and permanent. And, I think there are other ways to do it. We haven't had a chance to explore those at greater length, but with Office of Neighborhoods help, and also, we have our new engineering director coming in, and that's a great partnership. And also the neighborhoods themselves to see who might be willing to explore some of these alternatives, and what might work in one neighborhood might be different depending on density and speeds and number of pedestrians and that sort of thing. So anyhow, it's a super important topic to a lot of people across the city. I think there's room to innovate here. We just haven't had a chance to explore it yet.
And you're exactly right. And I think some of those ideas are in this educational piece, but I think, anytime we have a situation that we're in right now with COVID-19, it helps us to think outside the box, and this might help us create even more ideas for this. So I'm definitely willing to brainstorm about what we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Councilmember Thomas.
Yes. I want to thank Debbie and Charles both for the job that they're doing. It's very, very important. In regarding to empowering neighborhoods, I know in the past the city has sponsored training programs for neighborhood activists to help them represent their neighborhoods more effectively. I think David Massey and Bill Murrah ran some of those. I found them very helpful, and I think that might be something we want to look at again. Is that anticipated to reinstitute those training programs?
Yes, we had brought it back. It was scheduled to start on April 6th, and it got canceled because of COVID-19. We were so disappointed. We were ready to do that. It's a 12-week course, very intensive. We'd already had people registered. We were ready to go with some more training. It's a fantastic training. They created the curriculum, and Eden and I were tweaking it to update some of the documents in it. So yes, we definitely want to bring that back.
Yeah, I went through it actually myself, and it was very, very helpful, very well done, I might say, by Mr. Massey and Mr. Murrah. And I would encourage any of the neighborhood leaders who want to improve their skills as far as broad areas in communicating or effectively working with the city. I would absolutely vouch for that program. So I'm glad to know that it's still about to take place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay.
Debbie, thank you very much. I definitely concur with all of the comments that my colleagues have stated today. You have done a phenomenal job in this role over the years. I don't know if people actually understand that you actually will go out and you will help neighborhood groups that are actually dealing with any type of difficulties or challenges, being able to move forward with their common goals. And so appreciate the work that you and your team does, and also Mr. Lomax, and looking forward to creative and innovative ways that you guys will work with communities as we go through this pandemic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor McKenzie.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. And I will say this before we move on, just dealing with new and innovative and creative ways of working with community. We previously had discussed, all of us, those on council, of our Mayor's Night Out. And so that's something that we're still looking at doing and continuing on a modified basis, just going virtual with that. And so we will be reaching out to each of you to let you know how and when we will proceed in going forward with that. So new and innovative ways.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to move on to Office of Sustainability. Brian Blackman, we'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and good morning, members of council. I'm Brian Blackman, Director of Sustainability. We're a small team with 2 staff members. We've got Grace Levine watching on CTV. She's the new sustainability coordinator, fresh on the job, and she's coming to us from Raleigh. And we, like Office of Neighborhoods, typically host an AmeriCorps member and a seasonal intern. This year we've got Sarah Ludwin-Peary serving as an AmeriCorps member, and Hannah Bergman helping us as an intern right now. So our office at its core looks at city operations and the community at large and analyzes its performance across various sustainability metrics, how those trends, and then we collaboratively develop solutions that balance economic growth and both environmental and community impacts. If you tuned into the Mayor's Climate Council on Tuesday, then you heard the good news. City operations has not only met the 2020 target of a 20% reduction, but it's exceeded it. City operations are down about 31% compared to 2005. But that's just one indicator. So our team spends much more time keeping an eye on the source of those emissions. That's fuel use of vehicles, energy use in buildings, and the waste stream. So in addition to compiling greenhouse gas inventories, my team monitors over 400 utility meters across just over 100 facilities for performance. We manage a energy savings performance contract that represents 99 building upgrades from 2010. We manage essential programming of building automation systems across about 40 facilities. We manage 9 different public electric vehicle charging locations, and then we coordinate pace bike share contracting as well. So our team works with a multitude of eager internal departments and community partners to find those solutions to reduce emissions. We also manage energy use, and primarily we're also making sure that we can do that while saving money and being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. Some of those opportunities are timely and short-term, and some of those are long-term investments. An example of one of those opportunistic short-term sorts of gains is when COVID-19 hit. We got in touch with our hardworking facilities team and Parks and Rec whenever we started changing operational hours, and we started trimming schedules at rec centers that were having reduced hours, so we can save energy, reduce emissions, and we're saving money on the utility bill at the same time and mitigating some of those impacts. An example that most of you are familiar with for one of those long-range investments is the LED streetlight retrofit. And so we completed in December the retrofit of 28,510 streetlights to LED. And that's a big success for us, obviously, because even whenever you account for some of the in-house expenses that we had to take on whenever we took over ownership for the streetlight management, we still see a net savings of about $2 million annually through the reduction in facilities charges and energy use. And that project is on schedule to pay itself off in about 7 years, and it mitigates a cost that had grown by 46% between 2007 and 2017. In the community, we work with a variety of partners to find collaborative ways to advance energy reduction. Your family member might have been one of the nearly 2,000 people that went through a Savings in the House workshop that are hosted by KUB, CAC, or Socially Equal Energy Efficient Development. And that's a program that was collaboratively developed between our office and community stakeholders. Right now, we're focused on the Mayor's Climate Council. This would be an 8-month process, and it's going to be the most intensive sustainability planning process since 2010. We'll be supporting the Climate Council and their working groups to identify strategies to achieve City Council's adopted goal of 80% reduction in community emissions by 2050. We don't have any new major operating expenses this year, but we do have a capital request in there for the Sustainable Innovation Fund. And that fund will be used to take a proactive approach to investments in city occupied facilities and really develop strategic projects that place energy performance at the forefront rather than just routine maintenance. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about our work or our request. Thank you. Yes.
Brian, the Sustainability Innovation Fund, is that something you've already determined how that's going to work, or is that something the Climate Council is going to help work on? What exactly is that going to be, and how's it going to work? I'm looking at it here in the description, but not a lot of details.
Yeah, great question. It's an internal fund, so it won't be something. The Climate Council is focused on community emissions. Okay. The Innovation Fund will work with an energy committee that we formed internally to work cross-departmentally. So it'll train additional staff. We're a small team. So while we're savvy in energy management principles, we're going to train staff on energy management, make sure they've got the tools to do the assessments in their own departments, and then also fund actual investments that will focus on energy efficiency or occupant engagement and kind of that energy awareness and drive energy use down in facilities.
So, I mean, what's an example of something you expect to do? Is it?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example.
Converting fixtures to LED or to LED, or I mean.
Great question. So an example, a recent one. So we do periodic retrofits, some necessary maintenance, roofing and HVAC, things like that. Some of the things that we don't typically deal with are, let's say, Cal Johnson in the past couple of years. It's going through a renovation right now. We did some expansions. There were a lot of great things that happened. We added a couple new units, but we didn't necessarily look at that holistically. So one of the ways that this fund might have been utilized in that sort of instance, just as a for instance, would be, let's look at the existing HVAC. Let's update that at the exact same time, even if it's not scheduled for replacement for the HVAC and maintenance fund, because we're already touching that building. And then let's look at some of the innovative strategies. So a lot of what our peers will do is also come in with occupant engagement and look at what's an energy dashboard. How do you make the people aware of how they're using that facility, engaging people in a community space about how city buildings perform? And then is there a delta in there where we might be able to try some additional measures that weren't considered? Can we do advanced lighting timers or zones to better reduce that sort of energy footprint? Those are the sorts of things that aren't really typically in a maintenance line. They're kind of a premium add-on, although they pay for themselves pretty well. So we want to pilot some of that through this fund and embed those processes and also train staff through it. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming we'll see as time goes on how more examples of how that'll be employed.
Yeah, one of the things that we saw in our peers is a dedicated fund to do just this sort of project, so that you're not making that decision at the time of like scheduled maintenance. You know, if we want to achieve efficiency or emissions on a certain target, we can't completely rely on a maintenance replacement schedule, because that HVAC may not actually be targeted for replacement until well after that goal, because it was replaced sometime in the last 5 years. So this will kind of come in and accelerate those timelines.
Okay, thanks.
I had a similar follow-up question. It might seem a little repetitive, but just to clarify, the $50,000 proposed for this year's budget, is there's not a detailed outlined proposed use of those funds this year, or is there? Or are you planning to use them, be able to draw down on them as things pop up?
There needs to be a little bit of flexibility because we don't have, specific investments lined up for this. What's proposed in that is roughly between $11,000 and $12,000 for an energy management training for key personnel. And then we've projected about $30,000 just based on some rough HVAC cost for investments per facility. So you would look at basically one facility touched in this and about 20 staff trained.
Awesome. That was helpful. Thank you.
Hey, Brian. I know ideally you would pursue projects similar to the LED program that eventually pay for themselves or offset enough costs. Is that kind of an inherent goal in anything you would use the funds for?
Correct. We would look at a net savings of about 5 years payback. And we would hope to be able to do some of the more strategic occupant engagement things don't pay for themselves quite as well. So we would be looking at blended ROIs to kind of do some of these more showcase engagement projects in addition to actual investments in equipment.
Yeah, it's really hard to measure the impact of training an entire city's organization to be kind of sustainability minded, but obviously we can all kind of understand the benefit of that. But the kind of hard use of the other dollars would seek to be cost neutral at some point.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Okay. Thanks.
Director, I wanted to, ask a little bit about, where we are positioned as we're going forward with trying to reach some of these sustainability goals in more like a long-term project. Obviously, we saw, some really great success in carbon reduction when we did the switch to the LED lights, and that kind of pushed us up over the edge. I know that your predecessor, who was on the screen with us today, and I had talked many times about community solar as an option for, something to look at, as a long-term goal. I think there's some of those, and there's a lot of complexity there and a lot of moving parts, but are some of those pieces starting to come together to where, we could be looking at that kind of a bigger project to really make some significant reductions in greenhouse gases and emissions going forward?
Certainly. We've been in discussions with KUB about a solar community solar project in particular. They mentioned it at their most recent board meeting, and we're kind of hammering out the details about the space. It would be more of a lease or easement type arrangement where we would provide them with the space and that they would go out and competitively procure placement. So we're definitely looking at that. And we've got our ears open, and I was listening to presentations yesterday about some budget neutral rooftop solar possibilities here for the city. So we're always looking for them. If the numbers work, where we can come up with some sort of partnership to make that more appealing or progress it more quickly, even better. And I think that what KUB is proposing with the community solar project, I don't want to speak too much for them, but I think we're expecting some significant progress on that within the year.
That's great to hear.
And just so you know, it would be roughly about 1 megawatt of solar coming online.
I mean, I don't know if you have the data in front of you, but what kind of an impact would that have on emissions?
On the community scale, it's not a tremendous amount, but if you're thinking in terms of how much energy the city uses, that would be roughly, we'll say somewhere around 1% of what the city uses energy-wise. It's about that.
And that program is scalable, so you can scale up from that point.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about integrated solar into the grid rather than just doing a rooftop behind the meter, and they both have their place, and we're exploring options for both. But when you reduce it in the valley, it goes to everyone equally. And so there's a bigger community impact for reducing emissions. So that's the great thing about community solar. It also gives people a way to get involved that may value this and fund that. So we're highly supportive of it, and KUB's taken that to their board, and we're just hammering out some of the fine details right now about siting and location.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
One quick other question. That megawatt of power, is that the extent of our solar capacity for the duration of this 20-year contract with TVA, or that can increase?
Yeah, that is not the capacity. I don't have the exact number for what KUB could do for their load of generation. Some of their investments on the KUB contract in particular, if you've heard about the 200 megawatts that they're purchasing, that is not included in their percentage of local generation. So it'll be 200 megawatts plus what they can do for local generation as well. So we should see some significant carbon reductions in the delivered electricity here as a result of it.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, happy to.
Vice Mayor, I would like to request or suggest Brian be invited to one of our workshops, or when we get back to seeing each other in person. I got to participate in a presentation he gave that kind of gives a very good overview of the state of sustainability at a very local level, particularly our city as it compares to others, and the most innovative ways cities are responding and leading. It would be really helpful, I think, for us to have 45 minutes or so with him to see that presentation. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you as well. Okay. Now we're going to move to Center for Service Innovation, 311. Is Russ with us?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning. We'll go ahead and turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Russ Jensen. I'm the director here for Knoxville Center for Service Innovation, 311 and 211. We are, as we like to tell people, we're Knoxville's phone number. We have direct contact with anywhere from about 700 to 1,000 of our neighbors each day. 311 is strictly municipal services, so everything from lot complaints, potholes, codes enforcement, solid waste, trash pickup, you name it. And 4 years ago, almost, I think it'll be 5 years next month, we also partnered with CAC's Office on Aging and local area United Ways, and we brought 211 into our call center. And 211 is more social service related. So everything from food pantries to utility assistance to mental health. These days that line's been pretty busy here the last couple of months. We also jump in when there's disaster issues, everything from hailstorms to tornadoes to floods to the Gatlinburg fires. Right now we're also the primary answering point for people who have questions about COVID-19 and reopen plan, compliance issues, things along those lines. We started 15 years ago. We just had our birthday about 2 weeks ago. And we've had about 3 million calls in that time and over 600,000 different service requests. This center has been named the top one in the country twice. It's the smallest city to get that honor and the only one to have been named twice. When we built it, there were only about 10 or 12 in the country. Now there's 300 between the U.S., Canada, Central America, and South America. Our cost per call on average is about $3, and it's about the same per capita. We have what we call a really good market penetration, and we get around the same amount of calls every year as there are people living in the city. Not a lot of cities can do that, but that's because people have become accustomed to dialing 311. As far as budget goes, we're really, really bland. It's virtually identical, maybe just a few dollars less than last year. We do have one project in the hopper with IT, which is a mobile app that the mayor's asked us to put it together. And we actually had funds left over from a previous project, so we did not have to ask for any new funding for that. The RFP on that should close later next week, and then we'll be getting ready to move forward in the next quarter on that. We just recently implemented a chat bot. It was originally designed to answer questions regarding Census 2020, but as we started moving into COVID-19, the mayor asked us if we could pivot, and we worked with the company that put it in place for us, and we did. So it answers questions on COVID-19, reopen plan, CARES Act, how to file for unemployment. It has a direct connection to the 211 website for social services as well. It is machine learning. It is a bot. It is not a live person. So it only answers the questions that we program it to. But along with Carter Hall, we've been able to add a lot of information onto that. So we've been pretty pleased with it. It's had about 1,000 conversations since we went live on March 20th. Like I said, no surprises in the budget. It's pretty bland, so I'll throw it out to any questions.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, hey, Russ, I know I've asked you these questions in past years. And you've said that the phone call is far more popular than online. I just wondered during current ongoings if that's changed any. I know the see it, click it, I'm going to get that all wrong, is also something that might be on deck. So just wanted to ask about electronic online submissions.
That's actually a fantastic question, and one of the things that we were looking at doing in anticipation for possibly having to all work at home was trying to move more to self-help and point people toward the website so that they could do it. There was a slight, and I emphasize the word slight, tick in usage, and it was enough to kind of help us on a day-to-day basis, in particular when the original stay-at-home order came out and we had a big jump. But for the most part, people circle back around. They want to actually talk to somebody. And that includes people that are, I'm getting ready to reopen my business, or I'm an employee and I have concern about PPEs and things like that. They want to actually talk to somebody. And we've developed quite a good partnership with the health department over the last 2 months. And so we will tackle as many of the non-medically related calls, operational issues regarding the plan. So that they can focus primarily on health issues. But while there was a slight uptick, and don't forget those 1,000 conversations with the bot would count as those self-service. But other than that, people are still, we're still seeing 700 calls, 800 calls, depending on the day.
Okay.
I hope that answered your question.
I would just add, Councilwoman Ryder, that I'm a big fan of the See, Click, Fix concept, and I think Russ and his team have done amazing work. And even especially so during this pandemic. But I think that I've seen that concept, whatever vendor we may use, has been really popular in other cities. And Mark Parker is working on it with Russ, and I hope that we can consider launching something along those lines. But in the current budget. Go ahead, Russ.
So that would be potentially in this budget year to add that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
an app type capacity. Okay. Because I think for a lot of people, first off, you see things and you want to report things after 5 o'clock and on weekends. And then you call the number and it's not an option. And then sometimes you're out and you see something, and then by the time you get home, you forget. And so when you have the app capacity, I think the pothole, the light out that you forgot by the time you got home, will get reported more readily.
I totally agree. And these apps have functions where it can be, you can tell, like a tree down in a storm, you can look and see, oh, that's already been reported 10 times. They got it. And then that the appropriate person in the city, whatever, whether it's police, fire, public service, or office of neighborhoods can say this, we've received this, will, depending on the nature of it, someone's already on the job, it should be cleared in 2 hours, or we'll tackle this on Monday, whatever, we are aware of this issue. You know, just to acknowledge, I think a lot of people, when they have concerns, they want to know that at least the concern's been heard, even if it hasn't been resolved yet. But that, and then it can also indicate, like, you know, this one person has complained about this one thing, but no one else in the neighborhood thinks it's a problem. You know, so that's important too, because, you know, sometimes you can have so-called frequent flyers who think something's an issue, but, you know, it's not a codes violation, and the rest of the neighborhood has, you know, has accepted that or doesn't think it's a problem, even though one individual does. So it has some accountability in both directions, and I think it'll be really popular, and hope to, you know, get it out and then soon.
Two things. Number one, the more we reach out to people with where they're at, and if we can put it in their hand, the better it is. But they can also, going back to the down tree analogy, they can take a picture of it and send it to us instantly, which would be helpful as well. So it's win-win all the way around. We're looking forward to getting that up and running.
Director, I called about a month ago and received an overwhelming amount of wonderful detail of food and other resources. So I commend the staff. Can you talk a little bit, just briefly, about how you know what resources are available? I know that's a very long, probably, discussion, but generally, contacting 211 or 311 is only as good as you're available to stay up to date on the services that are available. So just briefly talk about that monumental task.
Sure, data in, data out, so to speak. But we work with all the agencies here locally and partner with United Ways in the area, and I say Ways plural because it's not just the one here in Knoxville. And they're constantly updating us. And CAC's Office on Aging has a nice woman named Pat, who her day-to-day job is to make sure that database is up to date. So people are constantly sending them updates on what they can and can't do. And then during the COVID response, there are several different groups that work. There's a group on strictly overall social services, one on senior services, one on food delivery, and things like that. And those people are keeping us updated. It's actually been incredibly impressive how well this community has communicated with each other and kept everybody up to date on what we can, what we can't do, what is available, what's not available. In particular on the food piece. Food at the beginning of the COVID crisis was a very high number of calls, and it is now down to number 4. And that includes home delivery, people that are quarantined. We had the issue when the schools first closed and the way people jumped in on that. And that food policy group really stepped up to the plate, and they keep us updated every single week. So it has really been an incredible exercise in community cooperation.
So it's a mixture of database maintenance and just people at different agencies that you're in constant communication with.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then we meet with the agencies locally every other month. Well, we were up until a couple of months ago, but we have routine agency meetings over at the LT Ross building through CAC and the Office on Aging.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Director, I had a question for you. You mentioned the volume of calls about food, you know, early on in March when we were kind of first stepping into the current situation. Can you talk to us a little bit about the dynamic of those calls that you're getting? Have you been seeing an increase in social services calls or more informational calls? I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about, you know, how folks in the community are reaching out to you and, you know, kind of how that's developed over the course of this time?
The single biggest one when it came to food early on was when schools closed. And so you had all those parents out there whose kids were getting fed at school who are not, or who weren't going to be. So for the first couple of days, that was a little bit iffy, but people jumped in and put processes in and kind of covered that a lot quicker than I know they have in some other communities. The other one would be rental and utility assistance. So as people were closing down businesses, people were in the process of trying to file their unemployment, but obviously hadn't got approved yet. They're worried about, how am I going to pay the next rent? How am I going to pay the next utilities? So when utility companies like KUB jumped on board and said, hey, we're discontinuing disconnects for the time being, we were able to communicate that with people when they called. So that was one less thing that they had to worry about immediately. So then we could focus on some of their other issues like I need food today, or I need food for tomorrow, or how do I get my prescriptions filled, things like that. So my biggest concern going forward now is when the courts start opening up and we're dealing with people that are having to fight off being evicted, and making sure that people understand their rights as renters and residents, so that we're not creating yet another homeless population. Because we're getting a lot of those calls too. Also, the other thing that we got many calls on early that has improved greatly over the last few weeks were folks trying to process their unemployment claims. The state website originally was set up for how things were back in December, and it wasn't allowing people to get their claims filed immediately. So it took time to catch that up. And of course, they were dealing with, probably 30,000 claims or so a day, so they were playing catch up too. But that's improved over time as well, and we're seeing fewer and fewer of those calls. But between food and unemployment claims, those were the two top the first couple of weeks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And then I think you talked about the evolution, basically working with the health department and making sure we're communicating with their environmental health so that we could take calls on compliance issues, social distancing. This goes back to the Safer at Home order. And then as they instituted the reopen plan, basically just helping communicate with people what the plan says, where we're at, what phase we're in, what they can't do, things like that, allowing the health department folks to focus primarily on health-related questions and things like that. And it's worked out really well.
Mr. Jensen, this is Gwen McKenzie. I want to ask a question related to staffing. I'm looking at your staffing. And so could you tell me the difference between a customer service representative and a senior representative? Is it just a matter of tenure and title, or is there differences in their job responsibilities?
There's two things. Number one, they have to have been here over a year. They have to have had that 1-year probationary period. And then when we do 211, our people that answer that line are AIRS certified. AIRS is the Association of Information and Referral Services for U.S. and Canada. I'm the statewide president for that organization. So they have to get certified in AIRS before they can answer that 211 line, and then they're eligible to become a senior. So it's a little bit of both.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Sure.
There was a mention of calls about evictions and tenants' rights. I've also received calls like that. And I haven't been clear on what current policies are. I talked with Ben Bentley at KCDC about what their eviction policy is, but in general, what are we advising folks in terms of KPD's role? Is KPD helping to carry out evictions at this time?
Russ, I could jump in here.
Strictly be under the preview. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say KPD doesn't play a role in evictions. That's all processed through the sheriff's office as standard practice. So we've never had a role, and we continue to not have a role in evictions.
I see Rob. I'm curious. What you got?
Thank you, Councilwoman. I believe in part of the state Supreme Court orders that officers are not supposed to be engaging in detainers. It's been put out to attorneys across the state and to different court clerks across the state. I'll try to find it, and I'll email it to Mr. Johnson, and if anybody wants me to send it to him, I can email it to them directly. But I believe that there's a pause button on that right now, provided by the state Supreme Court.
Thank you for that. Please send it to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions or comments? Okay, if not, Mr. Jensen, thank you very much, and we appreciate all that you and your staff do.
Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
You too. We'll now move on to special events. Is Judith Folks with us?
I am.
Okay, thank you. We'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Good morning, Council. I'm Judith Foltz, Director of Special Events. My office consists of 3 of us. I have a deputy, Kendra Brewer, and a special events coordinator, Elaine Frank. 3 of us have basically been working as a team for close to 10 years now. Approximately 1,200 or more events come through our office every year, including events such as Dogwood Festival, Rossini, Mardi Gras, Ola, Kumba, and many more. Our office also has events that we create, produce, promote, including the annual festival on the 4th, concerts on the square, Kidderific, which is a new event we started last year, Holidays on Ice, Christmas in the City, which includes the annual celebration of lights, Christmas parade, Christmas at Chilhowie, and New Year's on the Square. For all those events, we work on getting funding through private business. So the sponsorships will assist with the funding of these events. And last year, we raised $107,000 to help fund the events that we put on. We also assist the mayor with ribbon cuttings, state of the city address, and any other requests that she may need assistance with. Also, we help other city departments that possibly might need our assistance with different events that they do. Other duties include ensuring that all necessary permits, insurances, and agreements are executed prior to any event that seeks the use of city-owned or occupied property, city equipment, and city services. We process various types of special event applications and generate departmental service requests. Basically, our office is a one-stop shop for all special events taking place in the city of Knoxville. Stakeholders from the public and private sectors have a single point of contact to guide them through the special event application process. And also, just to kind of give you an idea of what we did several years ago, we collaborated with Lieutenant Sammy Schaefer, who's former Patrol Division Homeland Security Officer, and the Knoxville Fire Department's Assistant Chief Mark Wilbanks, who's Health, Safety, and Communications Officer, and created a crisis management form that enables us to communicate with the event organizers to ensure the safety of all event attendees. And since the creation of this crisis management program, we have been invited to several conferences to present our concept to event planners from other states and cities, bringing Knoxville to the forefront of crisis management in the event world. We also hold a monthly special events community meeting, or at least we did until a couple months ago. And that basically includes our entire special events team members. And that's from all the various departments that we work with for events being held on city property. And that includes the police department, fire department, public service, traffic engineering, parks and rec, CAT, UT, and Public Building Authority, and that's just a few of them. We touch on so many different departments within the city. So this enables us to invite event organizers to come to the meeting monthly and have all their questions answered and actually speak to somebody one-on-one. That helps to assure that their event is safe and successful. We work very closely not only with city departments, but also Visit Knoxville, Downtown Knoxville, and many of the downtown associations. I try to make as many of those association meetings as we can. We're also members of the International Festivals and Events Association, as well as the Southeastern Festivals and Events Association. And this year at the SFEA conference, I'm proud to mention we won a gold award for the best event photograph. And this is for the entire Southeastern United States for New Year's Eve on the Square. So it was awesome. Anyway, so at this time of uncertainty that we've never experienced before, the impact on these events has been incredibly difficult, as you can imagine. especially since the majority of these are fundraisers for nonprofits. We're going to have to learn a new way of creating community engagement. For example, we've had to cancel, as you've heard, the city's annual festival on the 4th this year. This is unprecedented. And we have teamed up with the Office of Neighborhoods to create a fun neighborhood challenge to keep the spirit of the holiday alive and provide a community celebration of our nation's independence, while keeping the health and safety of our citizens our #1 concern. So going forward, the special events team and our partners will strive to continue to grow and create experiences that will enhance the city and the community by modifying and adjusting to this new normal. So that's my spiel. Thank you for your time, and please ask any questions you may have.
Director,
Yes.
just wanted to, I kind of piggyback on what you just said. Obviously, something that I think everyone in our city and really the region come to look forward to is some of these special events that you listed. And, I know there's, a lot of, folks that are very disappointed that, we haven't been able to do those events. And like you mentioned, a lot of these are major fundraisers for some of our, community organizations that do so much for folks in need. So certainly, I think everyone will agree that, we all would much rather be doing those now, but, it's just not, it hadn't been a situation where we could do that. Looking forward to a time when that's not, when we're going to be able to get back to, having those events like we have enjoyed for so many years. Have you got any thoughts on anything that we can be doing now to prepare for that? Things that, council can be doing and looking forward, because obviously we want to kind of rebound with those events as best we can. Once it's safe to do so. Any thoughts you have for us on how best to move forward?
One of the things that we are doing is communicating. We have a group that we get together with: Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, Chattanooga, several other cities in the southeastern and basically in East Tennessee. And we meet once a month, or we used to. We're in communication with them, also with these Southeastern festivals and the international festivals associations. We're able to communicate. We're doing webinars with a lot of these, trying to find out what other cities are doing. And we're trying to keep in close contact with them to get ideas from them as to what they're planning, especially some of the larger cities. But in our case, there's also a municipal group that we're working with. So we're trying to put together some modifications, try to figure out how to address this in a way that we can keep our citizens safe. One of our questions, was what do we do about the ice rink this year? That's something we're going to have to look at. Do we have the ice rink? If we do, we're going to have to basically put some plans in place that will make it very, how do you do that? I guess it's all a matter of really thinking it out, and would appreciate any input we could get from you all, and would like to definitely look into talking further once we kind of dig into this concept a little bit more. We just have to wrap our heads around, how do you do this? How do we can't have our concerts on the square without, doing some major adjustments. So, that is definitely would appreciate any input you all have to assist us. And it is a trying, challenging time for us, especially in the sponsorship end. A lot of the businesses that we work with, Regal, Home Federal, all their funding's going to helping with food for children and Second Harvest and Regal. Right now, the department I work with pretty much is on furlough still. So Pilot Flying J, I think we'll be able to keep that, but it's going to be a challenging time for sponsorships, as well as trying to figure out how we can help the nonprofits bring their events back safely in a way that we can manage the situation. That's my other concern is, how do you manage a situation? People would love to get together again, and you've got to keep that social distancing in mind at all times. So it's a big challenge, but again, I would appreciate any input you all might have.
Thank you very much for what you're doing. And, I think definitely thinking now ahead of, hey, in the current situation, what are some things we could be doing that might allow some, participation in some of these, events that people really love. And then, hey, when things stabilize and we get, in a different place, how do we, really kind of try to encourage a comeback, and thinking ahead on that too. I just appreciate what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The other thing that, since I mentioned the crisis management plan we put into and we actually just had a whole seminar on it when we first started this crisis management. That was all a part of the shootings in Las Vegas, some other issues we'd had with weather, and all of a sudden we're talking about a new normal then. Well, this is another new normal. So we have the new normal number 2 coming up. So we figured out the crisis management plan. So I figure we can, I'm pretty confident we can figure out a way to bring back our events and keep this city moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judith, just want to add, when we talk about trying to get back to some semblance of how do we move forward in this new normal, I think it's going to be very challenging for us. And I do want to encourage us all as we get through this, and depending on which direction the virus goes as it relates to Knox County, because at this juncture, we've been very fortunate. We've not seen a wide community spread and deaths as a result of COVID-19. But if we are, when we get to a place where we are comfortable transitioning back into public events, I would like to caution us if there is alcohol involved in that event, because currently we cannot enforce social distancing. We can suggest and recommend it, but we do not have any federal or state mandates that we can enforce it. And when we talk about enforcement, that means from National Guard or from law enforcement. So and we see today, there are some sets of people who take social distancing very seriously, and there are others who have a total disregard. And when you bring both of those types of individuals together, and there's alcohol, then that will just exacerbate people's frustration toward one group or the other. And so, again, I think we need to make sure that we are getting very clear guidance from the health department, from the mayor, because if we have to have events and we have to have National Guard or a huge law enforcement presence there, in my opinion, is it worth what potentially the bad things that could come out of that? So yeah, so just want to caution all of us. I know everyone's tired of being in the house, being cooped up, and having to adhere, hopefully adhere and practicing social distancing. But I just don't want us to put ourselves in a position, even as we're providing guidance to people who want to have events. I think we need to make sure we're very cognizant of how many people, and if that's something that can even be controlled, and if it's something that's an uncontrollable, that we not entertain it just for the sake of safety on a whole different level. But appreciate all that you do. And when we do, I'm very hopeful once we get a vaccine that you and your department will be extremely busy.
Oh, yes. We hope to be. We hope to be.
Well, thank you. Appreciate all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're going to move on to, do we have another comment? I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
That's okay. I just wanted, Judith, I'm glad to see your face.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I do just want to say, because I have worked with your team, which is a mighty team, a mighty little team, and
Yes, they
you all
are.
are you all are working when everyone else is playing. But just to recognize in what you do, the level of detail, the logistics, everything that it takes to pull these events off, is you all make it look flawless and easy. But I know that it's no easy feat, and you all have always been creative and problem solved. And I have no doubt moving forward, as we're trying to navigate, trying to bring these events back in some way, shape, or form, that you all will continue to do that. So I've seen you all in action for so long, and you do a tremendous job. So I'm just glad to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Vice Mayor McKenzie, I just wanted to say along those lines, we do not have a mandate from the federal and state government to, enforce as much as we may think that's in the best interest of the health, but we do have the ability to control what happens on city property. And you can rest assured that as much as I want to return to the fun cultural events and festivals and events that are, so important to our community, I'm not going to do anything to undermine our recovery health-wise. And so I'm with you, is what I'm saying. And we can't control what happens outside city property, but we have a lot of authority on city property, and we'll put public health as our top priority.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. Just you reinforcing that commitment. Thank you. Okay. So do we have Ms. Roberson with us? If so, we're going to move on to Knoxville Area Transit.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. And I can't see you on my screen. I don't know if it's just me or not, but
it's me not knowing which button to push.
Well, there you are. Thank you for joining us. I'll turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Melissa Robertson. I'm the Interim Director of Transit here at CAT. And CAT operates 27 bus and trolley routes throughout the city. We also operate the Lyft service, which you may have seen. They're the smaller vans that provide trips for people with ADA disabilities who cannot use the regular route service. We have 100 buses and vans in our fleet and 312 employees. The vast majority of those are bus operators and in the maintenance shop. We, under ordinary circumstances, average around 10,000 trips on an average weekday. Of course, these are not ordinary circumstances. And for the past several years, CAT has presented an update to council during this legislative budget hearing process, covering things like ridership, special projects and partnerships, bus purchases, and improved technologies. This year, I want to report on what we have observed over the past several months, which is the incredibly essential nature of transit service in Knoxville and the dedication of the individuals that provide it. Despite coronavirus fears and our community's continued emphasis on getting out for only the essential trips, CAT continues to provide between 4,000 and 5,000 passenger trips each day. And the last couple of weeks, we're seeing those numbers go up towards 6,000 per weekday as more businesses reopen. These are people going to work, going to grocery stores, and taking care of their needs. They're individuals that are stocking shelves, providing us with food options, repairing pipelines and roads, working in hospitals, and caring for children and seniors, among many others. Our CAT employees have truly proven themselves to be essential workers, with operators that are coming in every day and keeping the public moving. And our maintenance staff has been tasked with disinfecting all of our in-service buses every 4 hours, which is a monumental task, and they've been doing a great job. Our purchasing team has continued to search for protective equipment of all kinds for our frontline staff, and our customer service team, in addition to assisting passengers and giving out public information, has been sewing over 200 cloth masks for operators and also made over 100 reusable face coverings for distribution to passengers who may need them. The professionalism and dedication we have seen has been very inspiring. We've worked hard to keep our employees and passengers safe, limiting buses to 10 passengers or less, eliminating fares to reduce operator and passenger proximity, emphasizing essential trips only, and as mentioned, providing protective equipment for operators and maintenance employees and face coverings for passengers who need them, in addition to disinfecting buses and facilities. In all my years in transit, we have never celebrated low ridership until now. We are all about social distancing these days, but we look forward to the day when we can again encourage ridership, and we're working with others in the industry to begin thinking about what transit will look like in the future for us all. In the next year, we hope to welcome Knoxville's first all-electric buses and get them in service, and we have big plans and grant funding in place for improved technology going forward. We have seen how transit is essential in getting our frontline workers to jobs. Beyond that, transit is also the key to a sustainable city with cleaner air and lower congestion levels, and a solution for low-income working families for whom a car is a huge percentage of take-home pay. We anticipate that as Knoxville reimagines the city in the upcoming year, and further through a post-coronavirus age, that transit will play a big role in our overall mobility and economic development. We appreciate council's support over the past several years as we have continued to provide transit services for Knoxville citizens, and we appreciate your support going forward. Thank you. And my battery is going low. Let me plug this thing in. Did you lose me? Did you lose me?
We did for a second, but you're back.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had to plug my phone back in. I'm doing this on my little phone here.
No worries at all.
I know. So we have a continuation budget request, and we are looking forward to the future.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Director, I had a question for you. You talked about, some of the process that you're going through to keep riders safe. And I was wondering, if you could comment on, I know you mentioned, I think, cleaning the buses every 4 hours, if I remember
Yes.
your comment there correctly. Are there any other measures that are being taken, that are taking place to help protect the drivers, as they're, transporting folks? And, the only other thing I wanted to make sure was mentioned that, I really do appreciate the comment that you made about, how this is really an essential service, and getting folks that, everybody needs to be able to get to work and help with a variety of things that the entire community needs help with. So anyway, just curious about, I know you've mentioned the cleaning, but are there any specific things that are going to help protect the drivers themselves?
Yes, thank you. We have, we're having numerous discussions. We met with the union for a good long time a couple of days ago and threw around a lot of ideas. We're exploring different types of, for about lack of a better word, sneeze guards and barrier type. We have some operators who are concerned about being sort of enclosed inside a capsule. There's some issues with that, but we are looking at some different options, and we have the employees fully engaged in exploring those kinds of options. For right now, because we are operating fare free, we are loading at the back door. And so the operator in the front of the vehicle is essentially maintaining distance appropriate distance from the passengers that are seated. And we have designated certain seats on board each bus as please leave this seat empty so that people will spread themselves out. But when we go back to regular service and reinstitution of fares, obviously we'll need the front door, at least with our current technology. We are looking at, I will tell you, we're looking at technologies for the future that would be contactless. And we do have a big technology project that we hope will come online. Obviously, everything's been sort of postponed because of the coronavirus, but we are hopeful that we will come up with some technology solutions that will also help all of us not have to handle money so much and that sort of thing.
Well, and you mentioned, obviously we've all been excited about seeing, the steady increase in ridership over time. And, I think the discussion here about a decrease in ridership it's more related to what's going on because of the current situation with the virus than anything else. But can you talk a little bit about, what you're seeing in that reduction in ridership right now?
Well, we are, like I said, throughout this whole period, we have been averaging between 4,000 and 5,000 boardings on an average weekday. So that's about half of what our usual ridership is, which, you would expect a reduction because there have been so many businesses closed, so many people working from home. We don't, I think any of us know exactly what that's going to look like going forward. But we certainly expect that ridership, once, as Vice Mayor McKenzie said, we have a vaccine, we can all get together again. But we are going to continue to look at different ways that we can have boarding on the buses, just explore a whole lot of different ways that we might provide service going forward that might look a little different than the way we've done it in the past.
Okay. Yeah, and just last thing, please, deliver a message from all of us about how much we really appreciate the drivers and everyone out there, helping to continue to keep that service up and available for this, like you mentioned, very essential task. So just please convey our thanks.
Thank you. I will.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, I just, again, want to convey how much we appreciate the drivers and the staff at CAD and the administrative and leadership team there. We know that they are truly on the front lines every day as they're interacting with the few people that are still using the transit, and just want to let you guys know how much we appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So everyone, at this time, we have completed the first session of the budget retreat. So if you guys would like, and I'm sure you would, we will go ahead and break early for lunch and then reconvene at 1:15 today. So Will, is the guidance for us to keep this line open or to disconnect and log back in?
Okay. I will close this meeting, and then everyone has a link to this afternoon's session. It's a separate Zoom meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Everyone enjoy your lunch. We will reconvene at 1:15. Thank you.